Hi guys. Hello. So we're going to do this for about 2.5 hours, day 6 of Daniel Howard. We'll get as far as we can. Then we'll finish up that tomorrow and move on to day 7. Yeah, I don't know. Not sure how you guys are feeling about this trial, but I know I'm kind of, it's not looking good for him, but I kind of want to see where this ends up. You know, it's not like Michelle Trakunas where we're like, oh no, we invested too much time, chat. Like, this was not too bad. So, I started this a minute early. Oh, YouTube doesn't lose its mind. Waiting for stream, offline. Please tell me it's working, because I didn't mean to do it. Tell me Rumble didn't just crap the bed. Oh, it's working. Perfect. Perfecto. All right. So we're going to get started. We're going to go till about the audio. What's wrong with my audio? Audio, though. Hold on. Hello. Is that better? Is that better, chat? So quiet. Is it better now? Better. All right. Better 1, better 2. Or are you hallucinating my voice? Let me just check my audio. No, my audio's up. All right, good. All right, we're going to go till about 8:30 or so. We're going to take a little break and get ready for 9:30. Got a lot to talk about, and got a kind of a neat thing for the end. Kind of like getting professional production quality in this a little bit. So, all right, guys, let's get started. We're going to watch this probably about 1.5 pace, because I feel like we could probably get away with it. We'll see how far we get. So let's give it a shot. All right. Ooh, we got subtitles today. Yay. Playback speed 1.5.
Our acoustics aren't amazing, so as best we can see from the microphone.
Sure.
You may follow.
May I retrieve 2 exhibits from Athol beforehand?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
This guy looks very fake, like he normally doesn't wear a bow tie. It looks like he's hilariously like, I don't normally dress like this. You'd have to go way, way back to find that, but yes.
Good morning.
Morning.
Please state your full name and spell your last name for the record.
My name is Barclay Stewart, Barclaystewart.
How are you employed?
I'm a surgeon at the University of Washington at Harborview Medical Center.
And generally speaking, in what capacity do you work for Harborview?
I'm a trauma and burn surgeon.
Fair to say you're a medical doctor?
Yes.
Can you please describe your educational background?
Sure. I went to college at Clemson University in South Carolina, medical school at the Medical University of South Carolina. I have graduate degrees from Lynn School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and Stellenbosch University in Public Health, and then went to the University of Washington for my residency training.
Is your residency in a particular area of medicine?
In general surgery.
And following your residency, did you go on to do additional training?
A fellowship in trauma and burns and critical care surgery
And where was that?
at the University of Washington at Harborview.
Do you hold any other postgraduate trainings in any particular specialties?
No.
Do you hold any board certifications?
In general surgery, critical care surgery, which includes trauma, burns, and intensive care.
Okay, so this guy's going to testify about the burns, more expert testimony about burns. Yay. I think we get the point about the burns.
Would it be fair to say that you're a specialist in a particular area?
Yes.
What would that be?
Both trauma and burns.
And is this a particular area that you presently practice in?
Yes.
How long have you been specializing in the area of trauma and burns?
For 6 years.
Do you currently see patients within your specialty?
Yes.
And is that on a daily basis or near daily basis?
Near daily basis, yes.
Can you briefly describe what kind of facility Harborview is?
Harborview is a very large regional level 1 trauma and burn center for both adults and children. We see patients from Washington, Idaho, Alaska, Montana, and Wyoming with complex injuries and burns.
What does it mean to be level 1?
It's a certification granted by the either American College of Surgeons, Committee on Trauma, or the State Department of Health, and it represents a certain amount of resources that must be available 24/7 for care of injured patients.
And would level 1 be the highest and the best level?
Yes.
Do you also teach within your area?
Yes, we teach residents and medical students as well as postgraduate fellows specializing in trauma and burns.
And is that because your facility is associated with the university?
Yes.
Do you publish or write in this area?
Yes.
Do you also review others who publish and write in this area?
Yes, for medical journals.
Are you a member of any professional organizations?
Yes.
What are those?
The American College of Surgeons, the Committee on Trauma, which is our national body for trauma surgeons, the American Burn Association, and the International Society for Burn Injuries.
As part of your ongoing training, do you stay current in your field on the research that you're doing?
Yes.
Have you ever testified as an expert before?
Yes.
I'm going to ask court to, if I can approach the witness.
Ma'am.
Dr. Stewart, I'm going to show you what's been marked as states 83. Do you recognize this? And feel free to look through it if you need to.
Yes, I recognize it. That's my CD.
Does that appear to be, looks like it has a date at the top, does that appear to be a relatively recent, up-to-date resume for you?
Yes.
Move to admit states 83.
No objection. States 83 is submitted.
So, Dr. Stewart, might be kind of a silly question, but what is a burn?
Burn is injury to the skin, one of its layers or deeper structures related to typically heat, but could also be from chemicals or electricity.
Are there different kinds of burns?
There are different kinds of burns. We classify them based upon how they occurred, the etiology of the burns, and their severity, their size, and depth.
What is the purpose of classifying burns?
One is that we can have a common language of how we speak about burns to colleagues and to patients, and the second is they are classified predominantly in accordance with how we treat them.
So different burn categories would result in different levels of treatment?
Yes, ma'am.
And fair to say that different burns have different levels of severity?
Yes, ma'am.
And then therefore different levels of burn would have different levels of associated pain to the victim?
Yes, correct.
Generally speaking, can you kind of give us a breakdown of that burn differentiation?
Sure. So the skin has two layers. It has the epidermis, which is the layer that you see on top of your skin, the dermis, which is the thicker layer that gives skin pliability and elasticity, and then the subcutaneous tissues beneath it, the fat and connective tissue and muscles and such. First degree burn, like a sunburn, is injury to that top layer. The bottom layer of skin is intact, and the bottom layer of skin is what produces new skin cells, so it's typically doesn't require medical treatment. The second degree burn is injury to that bottom layer of skin, and includes all the top layer, obviously, and into the bottom layer of skin. It results in a wound that usually takes a period of 1 to 3 weeks to heal. It heals again from the cells inside that bottom layer. That's things you get from typically skull burns. And then third degree burn is all the way through both layers of the skin into the fat or its deeper contents. And that's some rare skull burn injuries and things like flame burns, electrical burns, and such generate those deep injuries.
Does a second degree burn result in the need for medical treatment?
They are in fact the most painful burns, so yes, patients usually seek treatment for pain even if they're quite small. Large second degree burns can be very physiologically important for us to treat. They can cause people to have severe dehydration and burn shock and get sick from having large wounds and get infected. But even small second degree burns, because they are so painful, certainly people are concerned about scarring and such, seek care for most all second degree burns that are more than the size of a quarter.
What kinds of characteristics do you look for in making your determination as to the type of burn?
First degree burns, like sunburns, like everyone's had, are usually pretty dry because the top layer of skin is still intact, just partially injured. For second degree burns, once it gets into that bottom layer, they're wet and red and weepy as the fluid from our bodies leaks out without having that top layer of skin to protect it. Third degree burns typically have what we call an eschar. It's a thick, leathery, usually multicolored appearance that is caused by necrosis of the top layers that are burned or charred. The deeper injuries are hard to tell from a visual perspective and usually require surgical exploration.
Do you, when making determinations about burn, consider the cause or source of the burn?
Yes. We get very worried that burns need to be surgically managed if they're not going to heal in 2 or 3 weeks because they can form a significant scar, and scar that changes the way people function, the way their skin feels, not just the way it appears. We know that depending on different temperatures of liquids, durations of contact, the viscosity, or how thick things are in a liquid, for instance, in a skull burn, can change how deep it is. Flame injuries are rarely ever only second degree burns and usually result in third degree burns that need surgical management. So we're able to tease out which burns need surgical care more quickly and help patients get to their recovery more swiftly by knowing how they happened.
In your current position, you indicated that you treat patients. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you give us a brief overview of what that looks like for you?
Sure. Our burn center is one of the 3 largest in the country. We see about 900 inpatients a year, about 3,500 outpatients a year. There's 4 of us in total that do burns and 2 of us that do burns and trauma. So we split our time between those 2 specialties.
And what percentage of your work involves treating burns?
About 50%.
In your current capacity, do you only see patients that are there present with you at heart review?
No, because of our regional mandate and our large regional catchment, we use a lot of telemedicine in order to see and treat patients.
Can you describe what that involves?
Sure. So we have two pathways for telemedicine. One is from clinics or hospitals who are called concerned about a patient who showed up to their emergency department or clinics and feel like the patient needs to be transferred for us for immediate care. And the second and surely higher volume component of that is our clinic-based telemedicine program, which patients send in photos of their burns typically from smartphones. They're registered into our medical record, and we review them with our clinic nurses every day, and then have either video or telephone calls, depending on the person's preference, later in the day to discuss management.
So would it be common then for you or other experts in your field to rely on data that was generated by other doctors in rendering an opinion?
Yes, other doctors, certainly if they're at a clinic or hospital, and even patients themselves taking it on their own phone.
Would it be common then for you to review photographs of injuries as part of forming your opinion?
Yes, ma'am. Almost every day they're on service.
Common for you to rely on descriptions, notations from other people who have actually observed the burn versus you seeing the burn yourself?
Yes.
And is the facts and data that are generated commonly relied upon by other medical experts who form larger opinions about cause, degree of injury, and treatment?
Yes.
And is that opinion that is formed independent of the opinion of others?
Generally, yes. Although I think it's important that we see the objective information that we have, and then read people's opinions, so that we can kind of put together a holistic picture of what we think caused injuries and how to best treat them.
Dr. Stewart, were you asked to review a suspected injury in this case?
Yes.
Were you provided information for your review?
Yes.
Can you just kind of brief overview of what you provided?
Sure. Just like in seeing any patient, we try to observe the most objective information first. So the first information I was given were only photographs. Review those photographs, and then we'll follow by medical examiner's reports of 2 different medical examinations.
Were you provided photographs that were taken on 2 separate days?
Yes.
I'm going to show you, Dr. Stewart, photographs that have already been entered into evidence. We'll start first with states 20R. Do you recognize this picture?
Yes, ma'am.
Is this the injury that you were asked to review?
Yes, ma'am.
Based on your training and experience, would you call this a burn?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you tell me why?
For several reasons. One, it has just a very classical gestalt image of a burn. Specifically, it looks like there's loss of the epidermis, that outer layer of skin. When you see that, it might not project too well, but if you look closely at the image, it looks like a bit of a step off from where the skin is normal and intact down to where the injury happens, and that loss of skin is pretty characteristic of a burn injury. The base of the wound is red, which is often what a deep second degree burn injury looks like at its base. I think that the sheen over it obviously makes people think that it's a weepy injury, but post-mortem that wouldn't be the case. I think that's just an artifact of the image. And in the wounding pattern, there's burns that have 3 classic characteristics. That in the middle of the injury, it's called central necrosis, where the burn injury actually occurred. Then there's an area around the outside that's called the zone of stasis, where it's typically there's so much swelling and edema from the injury that it looks a bit pale. And then right on the outside is the zone of hyperemia, which is extra redness or dilated blood vessels from the injury. And there seems to be some mild evidence on the image of livor mortis or hypostasis from where the zone of hyperemia would be characteristic of a normal burn injury.
I'm going to show you as well 18F, which is a photograph that was taken a few days later. Did you also review this photograph?
Yes, ma'am.
Based on your review of these 2 photographs together, did that change your opinion as to whether or not this is burn?
No, ma'am.
In your review of these 2 photographs, did you form an opinion as to the degree of this burn?
It appears a second degree injury, pretty stereotypically.
Did you form an opinion about the wound edges?
As I mentioned, that step off and skin loss is quite characteristic of a burn injury. Sometimes wounds can contract a bit as they're injured and seem a little bit taut. It's a bit hard to tell from a photograph, but certainly the step off from the epidermis to the dermis is very common for burns.
Did you note anything about the epidermis?
That's missing in the area of the injury.
Did you note anything in relation to eschar, as you previously mentioned?
On the earlier photo, there was an eschar there, which would suggest that it's either a very fresh burn or not a very deep burn, either way.
And when you say fresh, what do you mean by that?
Eschar forms and second-degree injuries that aren't kind of well cared for, well managed within a matter of days, as we call the exudate, the proteins and other fluids and wound byproducts build up on the top of the wound. If it's a very, very deep burn, then the eschar forms as the heat or chemical electricity kind of sears the skin and deeper tissue. So it was not very deep, and it certainly wasn't days old.
So I'm going to take you back to 20R. So in your opinion, let me back up. Based on the information you received, you were aware that this was an injury that was present on a body that was deceased, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Based on your review of this injury, are you able to form an opinion as to whether or not this was sustained before or after death?
Most likely, it is an injury before death because there is that zone of hyperemia that is visible kind of around the edges, particularly at the more distal aspects of the burn injury toward the wrist. If there's no blood flowing, it's not possible to have dilated blood vessels and to have additional blood flow to that area in reaction to the burn injury itself. Were you able to form an opinion as to how long before death this would have occurred, based only on the injury itself? It's hard to tell beyond the order of hours, but it certainly is not days before. Were you able, in your review of these images, to identify anything such as blisters? Most of the blisters have been removed either by mechanical friction, which is kind of common as anything once the injury happens, the skin is very, the blisters as they form are very easily torn off and or burned off themselves, so not uncommon not to see blisters after a short period of time. Was there evidence, though, of blistering? Blisters would have formed initially over all the spots that are red of the injury. Doctor, in your training, you are not a forensic pathologist, correct? That's correct. But are you familiar with the concept of postmortem skin slippage or sloughage? Yes, ma'am. In your opinion, is that injury skin slippage? I do not believe so. I think it's a burn injury. I think it has a very characteristic pattern of burn injury. It's in a very isolated position that has characteristics of splattering, which is commonly seen for scald injuries. And skin slippage is a systemic problem that would have happened in multiple parts of the body at the same time. Additionally, to be able to get the blisters off of the injury as it happened, that level, if it was skin slippage and it was identified later in the post-mortem period, that amount of friction that would have taken off that skin would have taken off skin elsewhere on the body. So I believe this is a burn injury. Would that injury be consistent with submersion in, say, a hot bath? No. Can you describe why? Just the pattern of injury. Submersion injuries are typically happen when people step into a tub or a hot tub, or soaking their feet if they aren't able to feel their extremities for peripheral neuropathy from diabetes, for instance, is quite a common injury. And it's a total confluent submersion pattern of that part that's burned. In this case, someone's in there for a long time, maybe their feet and ankles, often their buttocks up to their hips, their arms from their elbows down as they put their arms in the water. It's also not really commonly seen in people with normal minds and bodies who are able to recognize that they feel hot and then can get out of the bathtub and shower themselves. It's usually seen in people who are very frail or have a medical problem in a shower or bathtub, like a stroke or a seizure, or who have very faulty water heating systems that produce water well over the standard 120 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, you've, I think, a couple of times now referred to this as a scald or thermal burn. Can you explain what that is and why you do that? Sure. The splattered appearance, particularly where it's thicker at one area and then both dotted with spared areas between it and potentially some dripping, again, more common with a scald than any other wounding pattern. Flame injuries tend to cause large confluent areas, and contact injuries, where someone touches or something touches them, is it's a pattern of whatever touches them, and it's 100% confluent. There's no sparing unless it's something that has indentations in it, for instance, a waffle maker or an iron. So this has a very characteristic appearance of a scald splatter. Could this have been formed by a chemical? Unlikely. Chemicals produce both acids and alkali injuries. Both cause a very characteristic coagulation necrosis pattern of the skin that leads to eschar very quickly, very early, even if it's not a very deep injury. And that wasn't present on these images. Was there anything about the location of the injury that stood out to you? The injury was on what we call the medial and volar side, or the inside of the arm. That's usually a place that's protected and hidden from the outside world. So that was a little bit a unique place to find it. Usually people are cooking or managing something, they get injuries on their hands and fingers, on the back of their hand or the top of their arm as they move things off of the stove, for instance. So to see injury on the inside of the arm, inside of the flank, inner thighs, inside the armpits are just very bizarre areas for wounds to occur if it's just a normal interaction with the world. In your review of this case, were you provided images from the scene? Yes, ma'am. Is it common for experts in your field to review scene photos when the source of an injury is unknown? Yes, we certainly do it for matters like this, for legal matters, and then for our patients, particularly children who are concerned for child abuse, we'll review images with CPS, for instance. In your review of the scene, was there anything that stood out to you as a potential source? In one of the images, there was a kettle with an open top that was on the burning stove. I'm going to show you what's already in evidence as states 63. Are you able to see that picture from where you're sitting? Yes, ma'am. Was this the photograph that you were referring to? Yes, ma'am. Can you just kind of give us a little bit of indication of what you're specifically drawn to? Sure. Just a kettle in the bottom left corner of the image that was on the stove. That was also seen in another image. The kettle doesn't have a top, which I'm not saying this.
So they slow played that for that long. We didn't get to hear about this. So he was like, but why are they like, there's thermal burns on her inside of her legs and arms. So she must have been, like, naked. Because the clothes would have to show burn marks. And unless they're claiming to burn clothes, I don't know. But they kind of slow played that the whole way through. That's how she got burned. Damn, they drug this out. Like, yeah, this doesn't look good for Daniel now. Oh boy. Oh boy, I bet they're gonna try to like show the pieces match up too, but damn. Why didn't we know that sooner? And then real quick, Unhung Hero for $2 says, "Oh, I'm gonna come." Don't come. Don't come. And then Skyuki. Or Skyuki. Skiakai. I know I messed that up. It is a new member. Thank you for being a member. Thank you for your support. So, if it was boiling wet, then the clothes would have just been wet. Yeah, they're just... No, I think they're saying he burned her with the, yeah, their fibers would be in the burns, too. Yeah, I don't know, like, but it sounds like he's saying that it came from the kettle, and the stove was being used, the wood stove. So... I don't know. I mean, I guess they're going to have to flesh that out a little bit more. Let's see where it goes.
It wasn't the cause of the injury, but it was just something that I noticed as part of a potential source in the images I received.
Would hot water from a humidifier kettle potentially be able to cause an injury like this?
I'm sure any water that's hot enough to generate steam can certainly cause a scald injury.
And again, doctor, I'm going to show you 63D. Is this the stove that you're referring to?
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Stewart, were you also able in your review of the photographs to observe where the victim in this case was found?
Yes, ma'am.
To show you 16G. Was there anything about this that drew your attention?
I mean, obviously lots, but regarding the burn injury itself, people who have burn injuries typically have a very hypersensitive wound, and it's sensitive to things as minimal as air blowing across it, and any variation of liquids above or below their body temperature. So to soak inside of a bath immediately after burn injury would be a little bit unique. People usually try to keep it clean and avoid getting it submerged, avoid exchange of temperature. Certainly would seek care for an injury that size, just given how painful it would be.
Would soaps or bubble baths potentially serve as an irritant as well?
I suppose they could, but not usually. We use them clinically to clean wounds. Quite frequently, we just are ensured to do it at the temperature as close to the body as possible and at the patient's own pace because it can be very sensitive to be submerged.
You testified that second-degree burns are often the most painful. What kind of response do you typically see from people when they sustain a second-degree burn?
Yeah, because the injury doesn't destroy all the bottom layer of the skin and the dermis. There are nerve endings that exist that are not injured compared to third-degree burns or deeper, which burn those nerve endings and they can't be felt. So because it is so sensitive, people do things to soothe it. Usually, cooling gels like aloes are commonly used. People use all sorts of creams and greases to oftentimes just to prevent the air from going across it, and they keep it covered for that same reason, to make it more comfortable.
In your review of scene photos, did you see any indications that there had been an attempt to care for that wound?
Yeah, acknowledging it, the photos received were only of the bathroom and the areas that you showed with the wood burn stove. I didn't see any evidence of wound care products or medications for pain, but again, I didn't see the entirety of the scene's photos.
Dr. Stewart, would it have been extremely...
That's a very honest answer from a witness. I don't know. You only showed me a little bit. Nice answer, Doc.
...painful to get into a warm or hot bubble bath with that injury?
Most likely. I would not have expected someone to have a fresh burn and then submerge it in the hot water.
I don't have any other questions. Mr. Johnson, though.
Thank you. Cross-examination? You good, bro?
Very nice by the doc. Very nice by the doc. That's interesting.
You can see it.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, shots. Oh my gosh. They're almost hooked up to the Zoom. That's really weird.
Doctor, when were you asked to review the information in this case?
I don't recall the exact date, but close to a year ago.
And your specialty, you're not a pathologist?
Correct, I'm not a pathologist.
Okay. Do you know how long Ms. Howard was in the tub?
I do not.
Now, showing you what's been marked as, or admitted as 20R. And on this image, is it right that it's on the right hand, or right arm?
Correct, yes.
And it's on the inside portion?
Yes.
Okay. Now, in your opinion, if this was a burn, it could happen anywhere to up to hours before her passing, correct?
Correct.
And you believe that it was some sort of liquid to include possibly oil, correct?
Correct. Yes. Correct.
And do you know if Ms. Howard was right or left-handed?
I do not.
These type of burns could occur, for instance, throwing chicken into a hot skillet of oil, correct?
Potentially. It's when you see cooking-related oil burns and fires, they're usually on the hand, but it certainly can also be on the side of the arm. Oil burns tend to cause a rather early eschar as well that turns white pretty quickly after the injury and then fades to red if it's a second-degree injury or an eschar if it's a third-degree injury over days.
Now, there was no other burns or marks on the body that looked like that, is that correct?
Not that I saw. I did not see all parts of the body on images, however.
Are you aware of other parts of skin slippage within the body?
Not that I recall, no, sir.
Were you provided all of that information?
I was provided medical examiner's reports and multiple photographs of which I did not see significant skin slippage that on the other arm, for instance.
Now, you were shown what's been admitted as 18F. Apologize, there's a little lag. On this one, that was taken, do you understand that was taken days after the autopsy?
Yes, sir. Okay.
And you described this as a defensive wound,
Yeah, I said it could be a defensive wound. Yes, sir.
but there are no burns to the backside of the arm, correct?
Correct. There are burns on this side as if they hands facing outward to expose the volar surfaces.
The picture of the kettle and what's been admitted as Exhibit 63, that's hypothetically a source of a potential burn, correct?
Yes, potentially.
Now, there was no, to your knowledge, there was no oil splatters or messes within inside that house, correct?
Correct. Not that I was aware of.
There was no evidence of any liquid being thrown within that house, correct?
Objection, beyond scope.
I'll have a question if the witness knows.
But as I saw, I did not see any additional evidence of splatter or how liquid was being thrown.
This burn or whatever it is did not cause Ms. Howard's death, correct?
Correct.
I have no further questions, Your Honor.
Reader,
Briefly, Your Honor, may I first Madam Clerk?
you may.
Those are actually really good questions.
Return to exhibits, Your Honor.
You may.
Those are actually really good questions, I thought. Because, yeah, if you shoot hot water all over her, there'd be, like, mess everywhere, but she touched it. That's probably what I'm thinking they're saying, is she, like, put her hands out and hit it. Or, like, she bent up against it or something. I don't know. So, I think the argument's going to be Kendy fought back. It's just not clear how she fought back. Or he strangled her near this, she fell against it or something.
I wish to approach the witness with what's been already admitted evidence as states 18P.
You may do that.
Thank you. Dr. Stewart, I'm going to show you a photograph that's already been admitted as states 18P. Do you recognize this picture?
No, off the top of my head. No.
You previously testified that you were provided photographs from both the medical examiner as well as the coroner.
Yes.
And when you were provided those photographs, were you only provided pictures of the arm or were you provided pictures of the whole body?
I was provided a large number of photographs, not necessarily the entire body, but a large number of photographs.
In this particular photograph, I'm going to be drawing your attention to this area up here. I'm going to go ahead and show this on a larger screen so that the jury can follow along. Stewart, I'm going to draw your attention to an area towards the top of the screen. I'm going to use this pointer here. Are you able to see where I'm pointing?
Yes, ma'am.
Is that a burn?
That's certainly consistent with one. Looks like there's some of the blistered epidermis rolled up at its superior edge, exposing what could be injured dermis below. So it's just a small second-degree burn, but looks even more shallow than the one on the forearm.
Could this also be consistent with skin slippage?
You can
Less
say I don't
likely.
know.
Okay.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Sure.
Was this at the same time as the first autopsy?
This was at the with a coroner photo. Based on your review of the body, was there, other than this mark and the mark on the arm, were there other large places of epidermis rollback as we see in this picture?
No.
And so in fact, there was very little epidermis rollback except for in specific areas.
Correct. And skin slippage often happens where there's higher amounts of friction that can cause the skin to slip from its two layers, which happen, for instance, on the back of the buttocks, which are not as affected as that area on the hip.
And if a body were, say, to sit in a bathtub for a long period of time in water, would that not result in large areas of the skin?
Judge, you're not supposed to go across.
If a body were, say, to sit submerged in water for a long period of time, would that not result in large amounts of the skin receiving that same treatment of being submerged in water for a long period of time?
Correct. Skin that's submerged in water for a long time does tend to slip in and out of its own self. We see that with trench foot. Not uncommon, like if you go in a house with wet socks or feet of their skin, the skin of their feet will slip off. Just that example.
And that occurs in large
spots.
areas.
Yes.
Thank you, Dr. Stewart. No other questions?
Do you want me to cross on that last section? Thank you, sir. Give me a second.
Commissioner, turn this around, clerk.
You bet.
I think that part was lost on the jury. I don't think that really did anything there. That second round of direct. That was really good cross, though. Who is the Chomo?
Good morning, sir. Good morning. Please come forward. I'll have you face my clerk and raise your right hand this morning.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes. Thank you, sir. If you'd have a seat back to the stand. And as best you can, I'll ask you to speak into the microphone. You may start.
Thank you, Judge. Sir, can you say your whole name and spell the entirety of it?
My full name is Brett Bromberg-Martin. My last name is a hyphenated last name. I'll spell the whole thing now. The first letter of my name is B as in Bumblebee. R-E-T-T. My last name Bromberg.
Honestly, automatically at this point, I'd be like, I hold you in contempt, sir. B as in Bumblebee. Sir, 30 days jail right now. Why, Your Honor? That was not necessary, sir. Like, ladies and gentlemen, excuse the jury, sir, I find you in cringe.
Is spelled B as in Bumblebee. R-O-M-B.
That's not funny anymore. You just did it. You can't do that again. You can't do that again. You already made the funny joke. You have to do another funny joke. That's not how this works. I put him 60 days in jail now. Oh my God. This is just awkward, chat. Hyphenated last name, sure, fine. But, yes, Lamau suffer. This is just... Yeah. Whatever.
E-R-G hyphen Martin. M as in monkey. A-R-T.
90 days jail. 90 days jail. Oh my God, I want to die already, and I've only heard him talk for 45 seconds. Not even that long. 30 seconds. I still want to die. This is how Jim must feel as the cancer goes through him.
E-I-N.
How are you employed?
I'm the supervising forensic scientist for the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab Fireman Toolmark Section at the laboratory located at 580 West 7th Street in Cheney, Washington.
How long have you been working there?
I've been working as a supervisor for approximately 2 years at this specific laboratory, but I've been employed as a forensic scientist in a fire and tool mark section for about 10 years.
Can you describe your educational background?
I have a bachelor's of science in biology with minors in chemistry and psychology, and I also have a master's of science degree in forensic science with coursework specific to the job that I currently work now.
You know something about firearms and ballistics.
Yes.
And how did you come by that knowledge?
Get the way he laughs. It's like, yes, I have very high karma on Reddit, sir. Thank you very much. If you don't know, actually, I am the best.
Well, in addition to grad school coursework specific to the work I do now, I started in the firearms unit of the North Carolina State Crime Lab, and there I went through their training program, which is approximately 2 years of full-time with a little bit of overtime training, and it really runs the gamut of the different types of examinations that we would perform in the laboratory in forensic capacity related to firearms and tool marks. This includes things like operability exam training and microscopic comparison training, for example.
Is it possible to do an analysis using a spent bullet, a spent casing, and determine whether or not it came from a certain firearm?
Yes, it is.
I'm going to get that trash can.
Thank you, I appreciate
Probably
it.
should be close to you. And so, this training that you had, did focus on that.
Yes.
And that went on for a couple of years.
Yes, that's correct.
Since then, have you actually engaged in that sort of analysis where you've looked at a gun, you've looked at a spent bullet, you've looked at a spent casing, and you've made the determination that the bullet came from the gun, the casing came from the gun?
Yes, that's correct. Since I was released from training, I've worked as a forensic scientist performing microscopic comparisons between firearms and fired ammunition components for the entirety of that time between then and now.
Can you summarize that procedure for us?
At a very basic level, I receive a firearm in the laboratory along with a fired bullet or fired cartridge case or both, and I make test fires with the firearm shooting into a water tank, which is exactly what it sounds like, a big tank full of water that's designed to capture a bullet in pristine condition. Then I use a specialized piece of equipment called a comparison microscope to compare my test fires to one another and to the evidence items. A comparison microscope is essentially two microscopes with their own objectives for magnification and their own light sources and their own stages for positioning and orientation, and they're linked together so that I can look through one binocular eyepiece and see both stages and the items on them simultaneously. So I can make not just an apples-to-apples comparison of two items and the marks on their surface topography, but I can make a Red Delicious to Red Delicious or Granny Smith to Granny Smith type comparison.
Okay. In this particular case, you agreed to analyze some evidence from an Idaho case. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
All safety is a time. This is all junk science. You can't say for sure. You can only say based. You're dealing with mass-produced tools on the cutting edge of quality assurance and design. It's consistent with that gun, but it could be any other gun in that range.
Did that include a Taurus semi-automatic pistol,
Yes.
as well as some bullets
One fire bullet.
and a casing?
Yes, one fire cartridge case.
Okay. And did you have some actual ammunition that was provided by?
Yes, I don't remember the exact number. I'd have to look at my notes to be sure.
Okay. Are you familiar with that particular model of Taurus?
Yes, I am.
Can you describe for the jury how one operates that specific gun?
This particular firearm, the Taurus that was submitted to me in this case, doesn't have much in the way of extremely specialized methods for operating it. If you wanted to fire it in a conventional manner, you would load the magazine with unfired cartridges, that's live ammunition, sometimes they're called rounds. And after loading the magazine, then you'd insert the magazine into the firearm, you'd pull the slide to the rear, and then let it go into battery under the spring power of the recoil spring, and it would be ready to fire as long as the key lock safety on it was in the disengaged position. And you'd be able to fire one shot with each pull of the trigger until your supply of cartridges was exhausted.
Can you tell us what trigger weight is, trigger pull weight?
Trigger pull weight is a diagnostic feature of how a firearm operates that I record in my notes when I'm doing laboratory work with a firearm. I assess trigger pull weight by what's called a dead hang weight, so with the firearm oriented with the muzzle of the firearm pointed toward the ceiling, and a weight hanger through the trigger guard onto the trigger. I use weights that are calibration checked, so I know that they're a specific weight, they are the weight they say they are, and then very gently raise the gun upward until I find the weight that fully depresses the trigger. And then I'll go backwards a little bit and remove some weight to make sure that one weight down, that is, a pound or a quarter of a pound or whatever I have on the dead hang weight hanger, does not depress the trigger. And then in my notes I record the weight that was the minimum amount of weight to fully depress the trigger every time I test it.
Did you determine the pull weight of this Taurus?
Yes, I did. I don't have it memorized, but it's written in my notes.
We're looking at your notes, refresh your memory about that?
Yes.
Could you do that for us, please?
Wait, why didn't they ask if we did a
The
report?
Taurus pistol that was submitted to me at the laboratory for this case had a double-action trigger pull weight of approximately 5.5 pounds.
Would that be typical of a gun like that?
I would say that's pretty typical.
Yeah, that's not really.
Did you go ahead and using that spent bullet that
For
came
a
from the
Taurus.
autopsy of Kendy Howard, the spent casing that came from the tub, and the Taurus that came from the tub, do an analysis to determine whether or not that fired bullet came from the Taurus and whether that casing came from the Taurus?
Yes, I did perform that analysis.
Would you run us through, in general, that process?
As I said before, typically I make test fires into the water tank for fired bullet comparisons, and that's exactly what I did here. I would have picked up the fired cartridge cases off the floor of our laboratory firing range and put them under the microscope and effected a microscopic comparison of my test fires to one another, and then the test fire on one side and evidence item on the other side. In this case, I also did a little bit of other microscopic analysis. I made a cast of the interior of the barrel of the firearm, the bore, and I examined that as part of my examination, as well as a cast of the portion of the slide that supports the head of the cartridge during firing, called the breech face. And I examined both of those as well as part of my analysis.
And did you reach a conclusion?
Yes.
What's that?
My conclusion is that the submitted fired bullet and submitted fired cartridge case were both fired by the submitted Taurus pistol.
Other evidence was submitted by Idaho, by the Sheriff's Department, and I think you have some other scientists out there in the hall waiting to testify, sir. But I wanted to ask you about GSR analysis. Does your lab do that?
We do one type of gunshot residue analysis for distance determination to determine the muzzle to target distance at the time of firing based on the deposition of gunpowder particles and other chemical residues. But we don't do gunshot residue, sometimes called primer residue, hand swabs. That's not something our laboratory does anymore because typically the probative value for it is very low.
What do you mean by that?
It transfers so readily from one person to another, and it can be washed away by just washing your hands thoroughly, that if it's there or if it's not there, it's not.
Means it's highly manipulable and it's bullshit science. So yes, the primer residue where they put paraffin wax on your hands, they finally admit that's bullshit, and gunshot residue gets everywhere, so it's not helpful.
Always necessarily significant. For example, someone who hasn't handled a gun at all, if they get high-fived by someone who just did fire a gun, that can transfer the gunshot residue from the second person's hand onto the first person's hand, even though the first person had not even touched a gun at all that day. And of course, if someone washes their hands very thoroughly, it could all be washed away as well. This means that just being in the room with a gun as it's fired can put that type of residue onto your hands or your body somewhere else.
Does any other state lab in the U.S. perform this type of analysis that you're aware of?
State labs, I don't know. I mean, there's 50 states, so there might be one that does it. There might be more than one. Our laboratory does it, and I don't think any other laboratories in our region do that specific examination either. I know, pardon me, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. So the Sheriff's Department sent some GSR swabs to you for analysis, and those were not tested by the Washington State Patrol?
That's correct, and if I was the supervisor at the time they were submitted, it would have been me who declined them for analysis.
Basically for the same reasons you described here today?
Yes, that's correct.
Any questions?
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Commission, close on clerk, sir.
You may.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have put up there what's been admitted into exhibit as a exhibit number 58, which is a blue gun or replica gun. Can you go ahead and look at that?
Is it okay if I handle it
Yes.
directly? Do I need to wear gloves for this?
No, this is not, this is a replica gun. Okay. Does that appear to be the same as a Taurus 380?
The one that was submitted to me in this case, yes, I think it is.
And then on that gun, can 5.5 pounds of pressure be used with an index finger to pull the trigger on that gun?
If this were the one that was submitted to me at the laboratory, yes, although it's worth keeping in mind that 5.5 pounds on the trigger of a firearm with dead hang weights is a little bit different than using your hand. I mean, guns are made to be ergonomic. They're made to be held in the hand and squeezed. And so, although it might feel heavy to just use your finger to lift a 5.5 pound weight, off of a countertop or a floor or something like that, I would generally say the same amount of weight or force is usually a little bit easier to apply with your hand when you're holding the gun in a conventional manner with your hand on the grip and your finger extended through the trigger guard in a normal fashion.
That trigger can also be pulled with your thumb, correct?
Yes, that's correct, or really any digit.
Now, when working with outside agencies, when you communicate whether or not GSR was not going to be conducted, if that local agency still wanted it conducted, would you do the test?
Nope.
And did you do your analysis prior to or after DNA analysis?
After, just by handling really anything, potentially there's the capacity, pardon me, let me rephrase, just by handling anything, there's the potential to damage any type of very delicate evidence, like trace DNA or a latent fingerprint. So the firearms section always goes last when analyzing really almost anything at the crime lab.
And to your knowledge, was DNA analysis done in this case?
Yes, I think it was.
No further questions, permission to retrieve the exhibit.
You may.
Nope, it sounded pretty firm. Why are you so adamant about not testing GSR even if some other agency wants it?
Specifically with reference to hand swabs, since our laboratory is held to international accreditation standards, that means we have to maintain procedures and technical manuals and instrumentation and personnel to be able to do those types of exams. And then all of that would be time and effort and money we could spend preparing to do other exams. And that particular one just isn't usually very useful for a given case. I know there's a very small number, or relatively small number, of private laboratories in the United States that do that type of examination, but what it can tell you in any given case is usually pretty limited.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, sir. You may step down. Next witness.
Jared Lynn.
Jared Lynn. Good morning. Sir, if I can have you step forward, please. Have you face my clerk and raise your right hand, please, morning.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you, sir. If you'd have a seat for the witness stand. Thank you. As best you can, please speak to the mic. Thank you. You may depart.
You're ready. Could you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
It is Jared Lynn, Lynn.
Did you know an individual by the name of Kendy Howard?
Yes, I did.
How did you know her?
She worked in my department at Kendy Health.
And when you say my department, what department was that?
I worked in the supply chain receiving department.
And what was your position when you were there?
So I had a couple different positions. I was a supervisor for a while, and then I took the manager position also.
Were those your positions when you worked with Kendy?
Yes, both.
How long did you know her?
So I knew Kendy about 5 years.
When you held those positions and knew Kendy, were you her direct supervisor?
So for the first pretty much 4 years, 10 months I was, and the last 2 months I took a manager position, so then my supervisor kind of took over as the direct report.
So for the 4 years and 10 months, did you work in that department with Kendy on a fairly daily basis?
Yes, yeah.
And then in those last 2 months, who took over that direct supervisor position?
So Carolyn took it over.
You know Carolyn's last name?
Carolyn Farnsworth, yeah.
And so for those last 2 months, did you continue to know Kendy and see her around?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So the way our two department, or the two positions, leadership positions worked, we're right there working in the department. Our office is right there, right, kind of right next to receiving and the flow of the department. So it was nice.
Still saw her pretty much every day?
Oh yeah, every day.
Over the course of that 5 years, did you get to know Kendy?
Yes.
You describe her general demeanor at work.
She was fun to work with, right? She kind of made the day fun. She would come in the door, ready to work, ready to be there. She would like to go, deliver and kind of hang out with all of our customers, just like other nursing floors and departments and whoever we worked with. But yeah, it was good. She was good to work with.
Can you kind of just describe generally what Kendy's day-to-day responsibilities were?
So Kendy was a receiver, so we basically took anything that came off the dock, so anything that came from our main distribution center, FedEx or UPS, we would take those boxes and we'd receive them, check them in, and they would go out and deliver them around the hospital in the afternoon.
Was it a physical job?
Physical, yes. I mean, we active. I'd say more active than physical. Definitely a lot of steps. I think we used to try to have challenges of who's going to walk the most. 25,000, 30,000 steps was pretty common. But
Now, as supervisor or manager, was it ever your responsibility to deal with injuries in the workplace?
Oh yeah, yep, absolutely.
And can you kind of give us just a breakdown of what that might look like?
So yeah, so you know, if there's an injury on the job, right, it was to protect the employee and to protect community health, right? So I came from Costco, and that was really engraved in me there because you just, if you get hurt, you got to tell somebody, right? And then so you know, we'd always have a process to report it. You know, and we talked about it weekly in our huddles. And then if somebody got hurt, you know, we'd use that as a learning kind of a learning part and kind of build off of that.
So if someone got injured on the job, would you look the other way?
Would I? No.
How about Carolyn?
No.
If someone came into contact with, say, a hazardous chemical and sustained an injury, would you guys look the other way?
Absolutely not.
Did you often, or should I say the receivers, did the receivers often come in contact with something that might burn them?
Burn? No.
Somebody, a box fell on them, or they sustained something that might leave a significant bruise, would that rise to the level of being reported to a supervisor?
A bruise? Yeah. If something fell, you step on a pallet or something, you step on a pallet wrong, tweak an ankle, yeah, all those things we talk about, and it'd come up at some point. So.
Kendy, did she like her job?
Did she like it?
Question calls for speculation.
You didn't lay any foundation for that, also saying for the moment.
Did you and Kendy ever discuss her satisfaction in her job?
Yeah, we had probably monthly check-ins or at least quarterly check-ins, and we talk.
And in the 5 years that you knew her, were you aware whether or not Kendy had worked there before you got there?
Yes. Oh yeah.
Fair to say Kendy had worked there for quite a while?
Oh, yeah, she was one of the ones in the department that she'd been there for at least. I'm not going to say a number, but a while. Yeah.
And in your monthly check-ins, did Kendy express to you whether or not she liked her job?
Yes. Yeah.
Was there a point in time where Kendy indicated to you that she was thinking about leaving the job?
Yes.
Can you describe that?
So it kind of came about when Community Health acquired 2 new hospitals. One was in Clearwater, and one was in Orofino. And I know she was from there, but she talked about kind of taking a job at that new hospital down there. Even though that's smaller, right? Quite a bit smaller than the hospital up here at Community Health. And so we're looking at job applications, and now that kind of rose interest in her that, you know, Community Health had acquired them. And, hey, they have a materials management department. Hey, they do receiving. Maybe I can go down there and do that. So we kind of talked about that and looked at the job bank and stuff.
Do you recall approximately how long before her death you had that conversation?
I would say probably 3 or 4 months.
And in that time, that 3 or 4 months before her death, what was her demeanor?
She seemed more excited. I think something, she needed a change, I think, and you could feel it. And all my team members knew that I always supported them, always used me as a reference. And she knew that, and that's why she came and we talked about it. And I was like, yeah, I mean, they're not as big as us, but hey, yeah, I can talk to somebody down there, and we can see if you're be a good fit. I think she was excited about it.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions, but Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Cross-examination, Mr. Johnson?
Morning. Hi. Would you describe this as a physical job that Ms. Howard had?
I'd say active.
Okay. And in your conversations, were they primarily about work-related activities?
No, I'd say a combination of both, yeah.
Did she discuss her relationships with you?
Some.
So did she express the affair that she had been having?
No.
If a person gets injured at home, would they report it to work?
If it affects their work, yes.
Do you think a bruise would affect a person's work?
Depends on where that bruise is at.
I don't know if it's...
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
You may step down. You're free to go. Thank you. Next witness.
Carolyn Farnsworth.
Morning, ma'am. Please come forward, please. I have you face my clerk. Please raise your right hand. Please.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Take it.
Thank you, ma'am. If you'd have a seat, please stand. Best you can, please speak to the mic. You may inquire.
Would you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Sure. Carolyn Dorothy Farnsworth, Farnsworth.
How are you employed?
Currently?
How about in January 2021?
Perfect. I was the material supervisor at Community Health.
And just in terms of the hierarchy in that position, did you have a boss?
Yeah, so Lynn was my immediate supervisor.
And then in your position, did you supervise others?
Yes.
Was Kendy Howard one of the people that you supervised?
Yes.
What was her position?
She was a materials handler.
And would she have directly reported to you?
At that time, yes.
On a day-to-day basis, where were you located?
So my office was inside of the warehouse at Community Health, and so I could be found anywhere in that warehouse area, back in receiving, or anywhere in the warehouse.
So fair to say that you interacted with your subordinates on a daily basis?
Yes.
Did you see Kendy Howard pretty much every day she was at work?
Yeah, I spent 40 hours with all those folks, pretty close.
What were your duties as supervisor?
As supervisor, so I managed all of the daily operations of the department as supervisor, so all of the delivery of materials, receiving, delivery of the items that we received, all that good stuff.
Did Kootenai have their receivers as hourly employees or salary?
Hourly,
And did they have a method of keeping track of time?
yes, yeah, we had a time clock punch-in system.
Can you kind of describe that in a little bit more detail?
Sure, yeah, so there was a time clock that was right outside of our department. It was an electronic, so they would take the badge in every day. If there were any missed punches or anything like that, the supervisor or the manager would get with the employee to fill those in, but they were responsible for clocking in and out.
As supervisor, was it your job to
Sorry, guys, we're listening at 1.35 speed. Nobody's this fast.
review those time cards, confirm them, get
Yes.
people paid?
Yes,
And did you do that for Kendy Howard?
yes.
And would that again have been just kind of in that limited time period before her death?
Yeah, so there would have been some crossover between Jared Lynn and I at the beginning of January when I took over that position, that he would have trained me how to do that, and then it was my responsibility after that.
You mentioned this is an electronic system, so computer-based?
Yes,
And is that maintained by the hospital for accuracy?
yes,
And then did you, as supervisor, manually review those for accuracy?
yes. So every time period before we approved timesheets, we would go in and manually approve those. If the employees missed any punches or had any edits, we would have a log that they would fill in, and that we would review and update if we needed to.
And so you would have been the person to review Kendy Howard's February time card?
Yes.
Wishing to approach?
Okay.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as States 51E. Do you recognize this?
Yes.
Do you recognize that to be?
So these are logs from our Chronos time logging system for Kendy Howard for looks like January and February.
And that would have been the document that we just discussed that you would have checked for accuracy?
Correct.
And that does appear to be an accurate printout?
Yes.
And this would have been from your, not yours, but Kootenai's maintained computer system?
Yes.
Move to it, and it states 51E.
Need a question?
No, Your Honor.
51E is it?
That with you, just in case you need to review it. So Ms. Farnsworth, what kind of schedule was Kendy on?
So she was on our receiving schedule, which was generally a 5:30 to 4. They worked 10-hour shifts. I know it had been changed a few times before that, but at that time it was 5:30 to 4.
And did she work a certain number of days a week?
Typically it was Monday through Thursday. Although at this time period there was some time that she took off, so she worked a few odd days that she doesn't normally work.
In your daily interactions with Kendy, did you come to know what her demeanor was like generally at work?
Yes.
And what was her demeanor at work?
She was always really happy and bubbly. She's sarcastic, had a good sense of humor, but generally great to work with.
In February of 2021, did Kendy ever discuss with you any plans for the future?
Yes, so when I came back as supervisor, one of the first things she did is let me know that she would be leaving soon. She was planning on moving back to Cami and wanted to let me know that she would be putting in her notice at some point in the near future. And she seemed really excited about that, and I think she wanted to let me know also, one, to be courteous because I was her new supervisor, but also because I think she was really excited about it, and excited for a new change.
I don't have any other questions for you, but Mr. Johnson may.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So, Ms. Howard would work generally 5:30 to 4.
Correct.
So, in the warehouse receiving, it'd be cold in there at 5:30.
If they had the door open, if there was a truck there, sure.
And a lot of times we're long sleeves.
Again, if the door was open, yeah, they tend to keep the door shut when it was that cold unless there was a truck sitting there.
And on her plans, were you aware of whether or not she was actually able to get a job in Cami?
I didn't hear anything about it.
Overruled.
I didn't hear anything about a job, no.
And in her demeanor, were you aware of why she wanted to go down to Cami?
All I heard was that she was excited to go back home. I knew that was where she was from, and she was excited to go back home.
Did you discuss in her demeanor the status of any of her romantic relationships?
No, not that I remember.
No further questions.
Need to redirect.
No, no.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Next witness.
Jodie Dewey.
Michelle, can you grab the exhibit?
Another witness to show she had some zest for life and wasn't suicidal. More of the Jussie Smollett defense that she's not suicidal. Chat. She is not suicidal.
Good morning, ma'am. If you could step forward, I'll have you come forward, please. If you would face my clerk, raise your right hand, please.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, I do.
Thank you, ma'am. If you'd have a seat there for the stand. And this is Mr. Kenny speaking. Thank you. You may depart.
Thank you, Judge. Can you say your whole name and spell both your first and last names?
Yes, Jodie Dewey, Jodie Dewey.
How are you employed?
I'm employed with the Washington State Patrol Crime Laboratory Division.
Specifically, what do you do there?
I work in the latent fingerprint section, and my job duties entail processing evidence for latent fingerprints. I also compare latent fingerprints to known fingerprints. I evaluate and enter latent fingerprints into the Automated Biometrics Identification System, also known as ABIS. I prepare reports and notes to reflect my conclusions, and I testify in court when needed.
Describe your educational background for us.
I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in criminal justice from Eastern Washington University. I've also completed a comprehensive 21-month training program that was administered by the Spokane County Sheriff's Office Forensic Unit, where I worked for 18 years. I have, in regards to latent fingerprints or friction-ridged skin, I've completed over 700 hours of training. I've compared over 3,000 cases containing over 12,000 latents.
What's a latent and what's a known fingerprint?
A known fingerprint is when you take a recording of the friction-ridged skin of an individual's hands in a controlled environment. This recording can be done by ink or a live scan machine, and it's a deliberate permanent recording of an individual's friction-ridged skin. A latent fingerprint, if you look at your hands, on the palmar surface of your hands, you'll see friction-ridged skin. And on that skin, on those ridges, lies dirts, fats, oils, we call those residues. And sometimes we can collect those residues from the surfaces that we touch and collect the dirts and oils from that surface. We also have sweat pores on those ridges, which exude oils and sweat. And when we touch a surface, an impression consisting of those coatings may be left behind on a surface. Sometimes that impression is visible, sometimes it is not, and it has to be developed, and we refer to that as a latent fingerprint.
How does one go about developing it?
There are many different methods of developing a latent fingerprint off of a surface. It depends on what type of surface it is. Is it metal? Is it plastic? It also depends on what types of other evidence is potentially on that surface. Is there blood? Is there other oils and greases that we have to break through in order to get to the latent fingerprints that are on the surface? And so typically we have kind of those most used techniques, which can be fingerprint powders, which you brush onto the surface and they adhere to the moistures in the residues in the impression and develop that in a contrasting color. We also have super glue is a common process. There's a lot of different chemicals that we use depending on if it's a porous, like paper surface, versus a solid surface, like metal or wood.
In this case, did your lab agree to do some work for the Puget County Sheriff's Department?
Yes, we did.
On a case involving Dan Howard?
Yes, we did.
Can you describe for us what your work entailed?
Yes. I received 2 requests. The first request was request number 4, and that contained items. The first item was 21-0-2015, and that contained a Taurus handgun, an empty magazine, and 5 unfired cartridges. The second item in that request was item 21-0-2016, and that contained a empty magazine that contained 5 cartridges. I also got evidence from request number 6, which was an additional request. That item was 21-0-2027, and that item contained a empty magazine and 6 unfired cartridges.
Can you describe your work?
Yes, I processed all of these items of evidence for looking for latent impressions on the surface. I started with the first request that contained the handgun, empty magazine, and 5 cartridges. I processed those items with what we refer to as Lumi-Cyano. It's a fluorescent superglue. So it's a one-step process where we put the item in a superglue chamber where the cyanoacrylate or superglue is vaporized in the chamber, and it develops latent impressions on the surface. It also has a fluorescent powder component to it, so you can look at it underneath a laser or an alternate light source, and there's also fluorescent development of those impressions as well. I processed all the items on this case with this technique. On items 21-0-2015 and 21-0-2016, I did not see any ridge detail at all on any of those items.
2015 and 16 being?
The handgun, the empty magazine, and the cartridges. On item number 21-0-2027, which was also a magazine and 6 cartridges, I did not see any ridge detail of value. I didn't see any ridge detail at all on the cartridges. I did see ridge detail that was not of value to compare to an individual on the magazine.
So in short, no viable fingerprint evidence in this particular matter at all?
Correct.
So there's a question. It's actually going real quick. What's a false positive rate of fingerprints? It's actually not as bad. It's one of the more original forensic sciences. Fingerprint analysis, especially now with the computer matching. This is a lot more reliable than anything else that's out there. So I'd argue it's probably a lot more reliable. Flux, how are you doing, Flux? Hello. Thank you for being here. We got a lot of people in here today. There's a Crumbly verdict. Okay, do you guys want to, you know what? We'll pop over to the Crumbly verdict real quick. Hold on here. Let me see if I can find somebody. Yeah. We got a verdict.
So it's good to see you in the chat.
I know you guys may not like going for the verdict. Like, look, we all know what the verdict's going to be. Like, we all know. We all know what the verdict's going to be, guys. But we're going to take a look. Let's see what happens. Maybe it's something better. Let's take a look. I mean, sadly, we know. We know. That's the sad part. He got screwed. So let's keep going.
All right. What's the outcome, everybody? What do you think?
I'm surprised it took them this long, chat, honestly.
All my
Got
phones
100
are
people
going.
watching. Good. Good. Got a nice amount of people in there.
Oh, hey, Sean. You guys sniping us? Hello, hello.
So, I wonder if they're going to say in the Kendy Howard thing, I kind of get the feeling here's what they're going to say for Kendy Howard. Her fingerprints were not on any of the cartridges. Although that gun sat submerged in water, who knows for how long. Because remember, Daniel's testimony is, I didn't hear a thump right away. And I came and found her like that. So being submerged in water can wash off fingerprints. So who knows how, I'm assuming they're going to say they didn't find fingerprints on the gun or anything.
I caught that one already. Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Oh, Jamie, you want a link? I see you in the chat. Get on up here and talk to us, girlfriend. I am thinking probably guilty, but I want to say guilty and then be excited when it's a not guilty.
I agree. I want to be found wrong. I want to be happily wrong, but hopefully he's got a better...
We've got no sound coming from the courtroom yet. Not on this feed anyways. I don't want to play
Yeah,
the
do
other
I hear the
feed,
courtroom stirring?
but I guess I
Unless
could.
it's at David's house. It's got a noisy house.
No sound on that one. There was sound earlier on the other feed. And so that's what sort of startled me. I'm like, ooh, we got movement again. Hey, Jamie, what do you think's going to happen here?
Oh, I'm trying to be positive, and they got it right this
Oh,
time.
see, it's me. It's entirely me. All right, hang on.
What?
You all talk, and I'll be back.
What
That's
happened?
the problem. It's me.
Oh. Anyway. Oh, hi, Nick.
Hi, Jamie. How are you doing?
Good.
And Dave took all down?
Oh, he said he was having audio issues. He couldn't hear
All
us.
right.
So he'll be right back. Anyways, what do you think?
From a streamer's point of view, I'm kind of hoping for a not guilty verdict, because that would mean an appeal in the Jennifer case would get easier. But I do, considering the earlier trial and them convicting her,
Yep,
evidence
guys, there is a
against,
crumbly verdict, so we're going to do that real quick.
Mr.
Also, in case you guys
Crumley
were
is
wondering,
stronger.
because I found this.
Okay, so I'm just going to pop in and say, I can't hear a damn thing. So
demonstrate things.
Okay.
That's
we
fun.
got that. So it's a training.
You guys talk amongst yourselves.
I was going to say, you
Okay.
can't hear anything?
Yeah,
That
Nick
sucks.
is on. He's like wearing a.
David.
I know.
Yeah, but I do think, considering the last trial against Jennifer, and he actually bought a gun. So, yeah.
I don't know.
But I thought his
Crumley should
lawyer
be
was
innocent.
so much better. And
Yeah.
and a lot of the stuff that came in with Jennifer didn't come in with him. And I felt like that was better for him, but I don't know if they saw it that way. Because, you know, they brought in a lot of the stupid text messages and the affair. And they obviously, all that stuff didn't come in with him. So. And then we all know Shannon was a special lady. So
Shannon
You know,
especially.
she's just a different kind of lawyer than this one. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure. Just listening to her representing Jennifer, she should have had at least another 5 years of experience as a lead attorney.
I think so too.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, you know
But this
what?
one much.
Here's the deal, chat. We'll come back to this, but we'll wait till because it's going to be another 5 minutes when they walk in the room.
Better.
So
Yeah,
let's
but
get
you
back
never
over to
know.
the other thing.
You're not.
Thank you. No further
We'll get back over in a minute.
questions.
Any cross-examination?
Would this be a good time for morning? Would this be a good time for morning? We just have.
I was planning to. Yeah, did you have
Yes, I
cross-examination?
do.
Okay. Is it lengthy?
It's going to be longer than the direct.
Okay. It is right at 10:30, which is typically when we take a morning break, so we'll go ahead and take recess for about 10 minutes. We might not discuss the case. We'll be at recess. All rise for the break.
All right, chattel. Time to time travel. Look at that beautiful ceiling. The Kootenai County Courthouse in beautiful Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Let's go. Let's go, chat. Let's go, chattel for...
Morning.
You mentioned earlier that there were 6 requests that your department, or Washington State Patrol Crime Lab, received.
I'm not sure in total if there were 6. I believe there were more than 6. I just know that I worked request number 4 and number 6.
And that's because 4 and 6 had to deal specifically with fingerprints.
Correct.
And in both of those, you were not able to make a good comparison. Is that correct?
That is correct. I wasn't even able to move into the comparison phase because I did not find any latent impressions of value.
I'm showing you what's been marked and admitted as, there's a little lag. Marked and admitted as Exhibit 16E. Now, before we get to this, is it typical when you're doing an analysis to get some background information on what the case is about?
Not always, no.
Did you in this case?
I had very limited information on this case. Sometimes, especially when the evidence is going to multiple sections, meaning that I might work the evidence for latent fingerprints and then it goes to the DNA section and then the firearm section, which is what occurred with this evidence here. Sometimes we have information from the DNA supplemental, which is required in their section. I did not have that information in this case.
Okay. And whose decision is it to submit evidence to a lab?
Typically, the decision is made by the agency. So there's an agency rep, whether or not that is the chief or a detective or even an officer or deputy, they can all make that decision to submit evidence to our crime laboratory. In this case, it was a little bit different because it's an Idaho State case where obviously we work in Washington State. So that had to come from the administrative level, meaning our my director or my commander, the Forensic Laboratory Services director, and the chief himself.
Okay. So, to your knowledge, did you receive any requests to analyze the purse, any purse that was found on the scene?
I did not. The only reference I'm aware of in regards to a purse is in request 6, the item that was submitted, which was item 21-0-2027, contained a magazine and loose cartridges that were submitted to me for latent fingerprints. In the item description, it was described as coming from a purse.
Okay. So, now touching on that item, the magazine and the cartridges were analyzed additionally for DNA, is that correct?
Correct. So that occurred after I was done with the latent fingerprint processing.
So it's fingerprint analysis first and then DNA?
Typically, yes, and in this case, yes.
Okay. Did you receive any request to analyze fingerprints on Ms. Howard's cell phone?
I did not.
Did you receive a request to analyze any fingerprints for marriage divorce documents?
I did not.
And again, that's not your decision to make what is submitted to you?
Correct.
All right, guys, he's back. So we're gonna swoop over.
Now,
very good questions to ask, though. The thing the gun was found in, did you ever try to look to see if there are fingerprints done for that one? No. Very good question to ask. All right, so here we go, chat.
Yeah, he is.
Fucking shackle him up like he's Hannibal Lecter. That would piss me off to no end.
Oh, that's what I heard. He's like 6'3". I've never been around him. When he's actually,
All rise. Court is now in session. The Honorable Shirley Matthews presiding.
that was loud. Turned it down a touch.
I don't know why, but
Good evening.
no, when she
Yeah.
said they said honorable, it makes me think of liar liar every time. And that honorable.
I know. Every time I watch a trial, I still hate this part. Don't you, Jamie?
Yes,
Your
very
Honor,
much.
calling People versus James Crumley, case number 22279989 FH.
Thank you, Mark Keith from Bath People.
I hope he wins just
He's
so
not
people
allowed to
can
take it
walk
in the
down
cell
the
with him.
hall.
Mr. Crumley, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right, you can
Yeah,
just
same as
start.
Jennifer.
I want to indicate, first
I was
of
gonna
all, there
say-
was a question, the media was,
They're asking why does he put the tie on? Because they don't want him hanging himself in the cell. That's a strangle hazard.
dying to know about. I'm going to read that into the record. I consulted with the attorneys who answered the question, and so then I sent the question back in. They agreed on the answer. The jury asked, please define Article 16.13, bullet number 4, define willfully neglected and grossly negligent. The lawyers agreed to answer the question. Please see jury instruction 16.18 for the definition of
Well, the
gross
same
negligence.
question as
All
last
other definitions
time.
are contained within jury instruction 16.13.
Was
I
it?
also
Yeah,
want to
the
point out
definition
there's a
of
request from
the
media to ask the
thingy
jury members if they would be willing to remain in the
was
courthouse
asked in the
to be
prior trial.
questioned off camera. Because there would be a verdict and no other defendant pending trial, I would have been willing to do that. But the courthouse closes at 4:30, and I have continually imposed on the courthouse for the sake of this trial and the other one. I cannot impose on the staff for the deputies any further. I also want to indicate that with regard to case number 2279990 FH, the People versus Jennifer Crumley, there is an order restricting pretrial publicity. It was entered on July 14th, 2022. That order will be set aside as soon as the verdict is read. I will also be issuing an order that will obviously not be made public in the courthouse until tomorrow morning. In addition, case number 2279989 FH, the People versus James Crumley, the same thing. The order restricting pretrial publicity was entered on July 14th, 2022.
Oh my God, Judge, come
and
on.
that order will also be set aside.
This
as
doesn't
of
need to be on the
date of
record like
verdict.
this.
Are you ready for the jury?
Yes, Ron.
Yes, Ron.
And why did it take him like 10 hours?
Right.
11 hours.
Yeah.
How long was Jennifer?
10 hours and 48 minutes.
Yep.
Hmm.
Exactly.
And this is 10 hours and some minutes. So more or less the same amount.
I just boosted the court, Elephant.
Let's get it
Hopefully that
over
helps you
with.
out.
Come on, guys, do the right thing.
They're not going to,
There
Jamie.
is a verdict, as the giant banner indicates.
There's a verdict. Guns are bad.
All rise for the jury.
Good evening. Good evening. Be seated. When ladies and gentlemen, I know you've
Sorry,
worked very
Dave. I
hard
forgot.
and all been awaiting your decision. I know this was a very intense decision for you all to make. I believe you've selected a foreperson. Who's the foreperson? You're the foreperson. Could you read the verdict, please?
It's funny if they said no, we want you to read it.
Come on, guys. Come on.
Oh, stop. They're not going to change their minds.
Count 1, involuntary manslaughter as to Madison Baldwin. Guilty of involuntary manslaughter as to Madison Baldwin.
Damn it.
Count 2,
Yeah.
involuntary manslaughter as to Tate Meir.
It's gonna be all counts.
Guilty of involuntary manslaughter as to Tate Meir. Count 3, involuntary manslaughter as to Hannah St. Juliana. Guilty of involuntary manslaughter as to Hannah St. Juliana. Count 4, involuntary manslaughter as to Justin Schilling. Guilty of involuntary manslaughter as to Justin Schilling.
Thank you, foreperson.
I want to know why those parents didn't send their kids to school with body armor.
This is why I'm done
Those
streaming
were
Jury
trial.
in seat number 1, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Jury in seat number 2, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes.
Jury in seat number 3, was that and is that your verdict?
Well,
Yes.
I mean,
Jury in
David,
seat
I know
number
there's
4,
a lot
was
of
that and
people
is
out
that
there
your
who
verdict?
cheers
Jury in seat number 6,
until
was that and is that your
someone
verdict?
you know
Jury in seat number
will be
7,
charged
was
for
that
their
and is
kids'
that your
crimes
verdict?
Yep.
because
Jury in seat
of
number
their
8,
neglect.
was that and is that your verdict?
Or even you,
Jury in seat
even
number
though you
9,
think you're
was
the
that and
best
is that
parent
your
in the world, your
It
kid
is.
can still make
Jury in
crimes.
seat number 11, was that and
Yeah.
is that your verdict?
It is.
Jury in seat number 12, was that and is that your verdict?
Yes, it
you
is.
got a smile on her
Jury in seat
face
number
like
13, was
that
and
doesn't
is
bring
that
your
your
kid
verdict?
back.
It is.
I don't know what
Jury
that
seat
does
number
for you,
14,
but lady,
was that and is that
look
your
at her.
verdict? It is.
Yep.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I know how hard this has been on all of you, just by reading your face. I know this has been a very hard
I hope they
decision.
vote not guilty just to see those
Oh.
people
Appreciate your
mauled.
time.
But
I'm going to ask you to return to the jury room, and I'll be there with you.
well, Michigan, if you live in the state of
Alright.
Michigan, holy shit, they're coming after your guns even harder now. Sorry, but that's probably true. Yeah. Good luck, Michigan.
In your position,
Let's go back to Daniel Howard for now. We'll cover more of this tonight.
Do you ever have to go on scene to analyze fingerprints?
Not in my current position, no.
But have you in the past?
I have at a different, when I worked for a different agency.
Were you asked, or to your knowledge, was any fingerprint analysis done at the scene?
I am unaware of whether there was or not.
And you did not conduct the DNA analysis in this matter?
That is correct.
Thank you. I have no further questions. Your Honor, may retrieve the exhibits.
You may.
Your Honor. I don't know.
Here we go. Close that screen. Don't just open the jury, you're not being brought. Can you redirect Mr. Ritter? No, thank you. Thank you, ma'am. You may sit down. Next witness.
Tyler Staples.
Staples, that was easy. Did it?
I'm going to start you come forward, please. I'm facing the clerk, raise your right hand, please, for me.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Feel free to have a seat there. As best you can, please keep it in the microphone. You may depart.
Thank you. Can you say your whole name and spell your last?
My name is Tyler Staples, Staples.
How are you employed?
I'm employed with the Washington State Patrol Crime Laboratory as a forensic scientist working in the DNA section
How long have you been so employed?
since October of 2019.
Can you give us a rundown on your educational background, please?
Yeah, I got my Bachelor of Science in Chemistry/Biochemistry with a focus in forensics science from Eastern Washington University. After I joined the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab, I went through an approximately one-year training program that entailed practical exercises and the different types of testing techniques I would have to use in the lab. In order to complete that training and be approved for casework, I had to complete a practical competency assessments in all of those different types of testing techniques, as well as written and oral examinations.
So has part of your training consisted of how to detect blood on some item of evidence?
Yes,
And you have experience in that?
I do.
Can you describe for us how one goes about doing that?
So I'll start by looking at the item of evidence, looking for staining that looks like blood. Typically, that's going to be a red-brown stain. I then test that using a biochemical test for blood, and essentially I'll collect a sample, add some chemicals, and if it turns pink, that's a positive result for that test.
Is part of your training as well as your experience focused on DNA evidence?
Yes.
And can you describe for us how you go about doing that?
Yeah, so when I'm looking at an item of evidence, I'm looking for possible sources of DNA. Typically, that's going to be a body fluid such as blood, semen, or saliva. I can also try and collect what is referred to as touch DNA, or it's or trace DNA. It's a type of DNA that is potentially left behind when a person touches or handles an object. The amount of DNA that gets left behind, whether DNA is left behind, is determined by several factors. The two major ones are the length of time of that contact and the texture of the surface. So if I just tap my hand on this desk, I'm less likely to leave my DNA behind than if I rub my hand on the desk. And then if that desk was, instead of being a smooth tabletop, was made of sandpaper, I'd be more likely to leave my DNA behind on that sandpaper rubbing my hand on.
What do you need in order to conduct DNA analysis?
I just need an item, and then I will examine it for whatever type of biological fluid that I'm looking for, or that touch DNA. I'll then collect that DNA. Usually I do that using swabbing. I'll swab the item to collect the DNA, and then I'll take that through the DNA typing process.
In this case, your lab accepted a number of items from the Cook County Sheriff's Office for analysis in the Dan Howard case. Is that correct?
Yes.
Can you describe for us the various items of evidence that you analyzed?
Yes, could I?
Just run through that list for us. Do you need to refresh your memory?
Yes, could I refer to my report?
Please.
I analyzed a...
Judge, your refreshing memory.
Sure. All right, so if you need to refresh your memory by looking at the report, and then after you refresh your memory, let us know, and then if you can testify from your memory, that's what we prefer. If you can't, we'll talk about whether or not it comes in another one.
Okay. I examined a green bath towel. I examined ammunition that was reportedly removed from the magazine that was with a Taurus pistol that was found inside of the bathtub. I examined that Taurus pistol. I examined that magazine, and I also examined fingernail clippings from Kendy Howard, and I examined a magazine and ammunition that was recovered from a purse belonging to Kendy Howard.
The fingernail clippings would have been from her autopsy?
I believe so.
Okay. Let's kind of break this up, starting with the green towel that you got. Can you describe what sort of analysis you did on that green towel?
Yes, I was looking at that towel for possible blood. I tested several stains that appeared consistent with what I would expect from blood, and I got negative results for that. So no blood was detected on that item.
And was that the sum total of the analysis you did on that green towel?
Yes.
All right. What's the next item or items of evidence that you focused on?
I tested the pistol that was found in the bathtub.
Okay. And can you describe for us what you tested it for?
I was looking at that pistol. I observed red-brown staining on the grip area of the pistol, and I tested that staining using that biochemical test, and it tested positive for blood. I then tried to swab. I would swab the grip, the trigger guard, and the rear half of the slide, trying to collect that potential touch DNA. I also tested those swabs, and I was trying to avoid any of the visible red-brown staining in that process to try and focus on that touch DNA. I tested those swabs using that biochemical test, and I got a positive result for blood on those swabs. I also took a sample of the staining consistent with blood on the grip as well.
And did you reach some conclusions then?
Yes, the sample I took from the staining consistent with blood on the grip had human DNA, but no male DNA, so I did not perform DNA typing analysis on that. And then the sample that was from the grip, trigger guard, trigger, and the rear half of the slide, I obtained a DNA profile that was consistent with having originated from two contributors. Kendy Howard was included as a major contributor to the profile, and Daniel Howard is excluded as a contributor to that profile.
Were you able to identify the other contributor or not?
I was not.
Okay. And so this would have been what part of the gun that you found this on?
This was the grip, trigger guard, and the rear half of the slide.
These items had been immersed in a bathtub with Kendy's blood in it. Is that your understanding?
As far as I understand, it was recovered from a bathtub.
Would that have contributed to finding her DNA on those surfaces?
Yeah, her DNA would be expected to be there if her blood was in the bathtub.
Okay. Tell us about the rest of your analysis, please.
I analyzed that magazine that was included in the with the pistol. There was a stain consistent with blood on the base of the pistol, and I swabbed the rest of, or the base of the magazine, excuse me, and I swabbed the rest of the magazine for that touch DNA, avoiding that stain on the base of the pistol. I took that forward through the DNA extraction process, and I detected human DNA, including male DNA, that was not an amount suitable for further analysis.
Did you do any work with the bullets that were inside of that magazine?
Yes, there was a separate item that was submitted that was reportedly the ammunition, the cartridges that were removed from that magazine. I swabbed those. I tested those swabs for blood and got a negative result. And then I took that forward through the DNA typing process. I got a profile that was consistent with having originated from two individuals. Kendy Howard was included as the major contributor of that profile, and Daniel Howard was excluded as a contributor to that profile.
Lastly, did you perform some analysis on a magazine and bullets that were in Kendy's purse?
I did.
Tell us about your findings there.
Once again, I swabbed those looking for that potential touch DNA. I didn't see any staining on that, so I didn't test it for blood.
I ended up getting a DNA profile that was consistent with having originated from 3 contributors. Kendy Howard was included as a contributor to that, as a major contributor to that profile, and she was assumed for my analysis since the magazine came out of her purse. Daniel Howard was included as a possible contributor to that profile. Assuming 3 contributors, and Kendy Howard as one of those contributors, it is 130 quadrillion times more likely to observe that DNA profile if it originated from Kendy Howard and Daniel Howard and 1 unknown contributor, rather than if it originated from Kendy Howard and 2 unrelated individuals selected at random from the U.S. population.
All right, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you. Cross-examination.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
You just talked about likelihood. Is it true you use what's called a likeliness ratio?
Yeah, the statistic I generate is called a likelihood ratio. And so what that is I'm comparing 2 alternate explanations for that DNA profile. One of those explanations was that the profile originated from Kendy Howard, Daniel Howard, and 1 unknown individual. And the alternate explanation is that the profile originated from Kendy Howard and 2 unrelated individuals selected at random from the U.S. population. And that statistic is the amount of statistical weight given to one of those propositions over the other one. So in this case, it was 130 quadrillion times more likely to observe the DNA profile if Daniel Howard, Kendy Howard, and 1 unknown individual were the contributors of the profile, rather than if it originated from Kendy Howard and 2 unrelated individuals selected at random from the U.S. population.
And just to be clear, you're talking about the magazine that was found in the purse, correct?
Correct.
Now, in talking about the likelihood ratios, you working with the Washington State Patrol, there are different categories of likeliness in dealing with the likelihood ratio in DNA, correct?
There are different verbal qualifiers that are recommended by a governing body, a body called SWIGDAM, which is the Scientific Working Group for DNA Analysis Methods, I believe. And those verbal qualifiers, based on the range in which the statistic is, it's a verbal qualifier to help give a verbal weight along with that statistical number.
So that verbal weight, for instance, if it was 0 to 400, it'd be likely, correct?
No, if it was 0 to 99, that would be, or 2 to 99, that would be limited support for inclusion. If it was 99 to 9,999, that would be moderate support for inclusion. If it was 10,000 to 999,999, that would be strong support for inclusion. And then anything that is greater than 1 million is considered very strong support for inclusion.
So the verbal weight you would give to the magazine, having consisted of both Mr. and Mrs. Howard's DNA with some other individuals, is very likely, correct?
Very strong support.
Now, when starting with the bath towel, did you review, when you were doing your DNA analysis, do you review any police reports or any information regarding the contents of the analysis?
I usually get a DNA supplemental that has kind of a summary of what the allegations in the case are, and that allows me to have an idea of what types of body fluids I might be looking for, or what I might be trying to look for in the case. Because in a case where, say it's a stabbing or something, or an assault, I'm not necessarily going to be wasting my time looking for semen in that case.
So with the bath towel, it was your understanding that this is the damp bath towel found in the bedroom?
All I knew was that it was a green bath towel. I don't recall where it was located from, and I don't believe I have that information.
Okay. You received both the left and right fingernails?
Yes.
Clippings? And that was from the autopsy?
I believe they were collected at autopsy, yes.
You also received a gunshot residue kit that was collected at autopsy?
I received a gunshot residue kit. It was submitted to me as autopsy samples. I opened it up just for inventory purposes because I was making sure, I thought that it was going to have the reference sample for Kendy Howard. Once I realized that it was the gunshot residue collection kit, I resealed it and let the detective in the case know that I needed the other samples, the reference sample for her.
Okay. So human, well, let's start with the torus. Your understanding was torus was found in the tub?
Yes, that is my understanding.
And the DNA that was tested on the torus consisted of 2 individuals, correct?
Yes, I got a profile that was consistent with having originated from 2 individuals.
And Mr. Howard was excluded from that?
Yes.
So that means it's even in that, when we go back to that limited range, he's not even considered in the 2 to 99. He's excluded from that profile, correct?
Yes, he is excluded from that profile.
Okay. Were you provided any other possible reference samples to compare who that other individual might have been?
I was not.
Does that happen sometimes in the course of an investigation?
Yes, it does.
So when you provide law enforcement that someone doesn't isn't on the DNA, you might later get another profile?
Occasionally, I will get additional profiles to test against that profile that I developed, or additional reference samples to test against that profile that I developed to try and identify that individual, but not always.
Whose job is it to provide your lab that profile?
The law enforcement agency.
In the 3 years of the investigation, did law enforcement ever provide any supplemental profiles to you?
No.
Now, the magazine that was found in the gun, in the bottom of the bathtub, we talked about earlier, you tested as well.
Yes.
And you tested the individual bullets?
Yes. Those were submitted as a different item, if I recall.
Okay. And again, Mr. Howard was excluded as a contributor for those?
He was excluded as a contributor from the bullets, or from the cartridges. For the sample I took from the magazine, I detected human DNA, including low-level male DNA, and that low-level male DNA was a amount not suitable for further analysis.
So he's excluded from the bullets that were within that magazine from the bottom of the tub?
Yes.
But you did detect male DNA?
I did detect male DNA.
What did you do with the fingernails?
On the fingernails, on the left-hand fingernails, one of the fingernails I observed staining, red-brown staining, and I tested that stain, and it tested positive for blood. I then collected that fingernail separately from the remaining left-hand fingernails, and then on the right-hand fingernails, I didn't see any additional blood. On the left-hand fingernails, when I swabbed the remaining nails, I tested those swabs for blood and got a negative result. On the right-hand fingernails, when I swabbed them, I tested those for blood, and I also got a negative result.
And finally, you said that there was blood that was found on the grip of the Taurus?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if questions.
Any reader? Okay. Thank you, sir. Next witness.
Anna Myers.
That's the only way they can say mathematically into scientific certainty, saying it's impossible, it's anybody else. Because they can't say there's no other person in the world. It's easier to say with numbers like that, the certainty of it's like 1 in 700 billion. Well, there's only 7 billion people on Earth, so obviously there's no possible way it can be anybody but that person.
It looks like Ms. Myers stepped out, so we will call Lisa Bostaff.
Your Honor, are we...
Oh, I apologize. Mr. Johnson wanted to address the court prior to Ms.
What the
Bostaff's
fuck? What the
Okay.
fuck is that?
My members of the jury, I'll have you take a recess while we address that. So, you might not discuss the case. Mr. Axon,
Fuck is it? Fuck is a bug. It's a spider. Killed it. What is the Taurus? The Taurus is a type of pistol. It's a pistol manufacturer out of Brazil. So that's what a Taurus is. That she used a Taurus pistol, just like a Beretta or a Glock. It's a company.
You can see it. Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, as you know from reviewing the grand jury proceedings, Ms. Bostaff's testimony revolves around the escalation of domestic violence. The concerning thing in this case is we're on day 6, and there's yet been one person that has witnessed a single act of domestic violence on Mr. Howard. Certainly there's inference from the state's charge of domestic battery that involves pictures, but neither one of either Mr. Prado or Melissa observed any acts of violence. I think it's significant that Brooke, who not only lived growing up, but lived for 5 years in the home, described maybe some name calling, but did not describe a single act of domestic violence. Here, the use of this witness would only be served to bolster testimony as it relates to possibly the alleged domestic battery that occurred in July, and specifically to say that because, and the jury hasn't even found him guilty of that yet, But because of previous acts of domestic violence, there's an increased likelihood of a potential homicide. And the state can't have its cake and eat it too. It is used as propensity evidence. Right now, if they call this witness, there's no factual basis, as of yet, of prior domestic violence. It does not assist the trier of fact to determine A, whether a battery did occur in July of 2020, or B, whether this was a staged suicide in February of 2021. It does not help them other than for propensity. It is greatly jeopardizes Mr. Howard's rights to a fair trial, and I don't think it is proper to call her as a witness.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson?
First and foremost, Judge, this has already been litigated. And so Mr. Johnson is attempting to relitigate a 12B motion that was already well considered, well argued, and well decided by Judge Meyer. Second of all, I would caution this court from accepting Mr. Johnson's representations as to history of domestic violence. The state is limited in its ability to offer certain types of evidence, as it would be hearsay without a viable exception, or 404B, that the state did not believe that it could get presented to this jury. And so simply Mr. Johnson's representations do not perhaps accurately reflect the history of this case. Regardless, Dr. Bostaff is not here to comment on the history of domestic violence in this case. Dr. Bostaff is here to educate this jury as a blind expert on the dynamics of domestic violence. That is what she is here for. That is what has already been argued, discussed, and considered and ruled upon by this court. And we would ask this court to let this ruling stand and allow Dr. Bostaff to testify.
Thank you, Your Honor. And again, this counsel is likely aware that the standard for 12B, while it is a complete different standard, that is constitutional issues that we attached some, what we figured or what we determined were significant errors and or issues with the grand jury, and they were coupled with our 12B motions. A 12B, dismissal of evidence or otherwise, is a separate standard than at the time of trial. Certainly, if I don't make this objection, I have to make a record and preserve it. But still, there is, and the state says that there's this evidence of 404B. Well, we had 404B hearings. If they wanted to make a case to then have an expert come in and talk about propensity evidence, we should have had a 404B hearing on that. But as of now, when they chose to call Dr. Bostaff, there is nothing before this court other than the charges alleged about escalation of domestic violence. I think it is improper bolstering. I do think it was improper for the grand jury, but I definitely think it's improper right now. And it would only be used in propensity. And so we would ask that the court not allow Ms. Bostaff to, again, it does not, her testimony does not assist the trier of fact on whether those two events occurred, and it only has the option of bolstering the state's theory.
Wasn't this issue the subject of your motion to exclude Dr. Bostaff from testifying at trial? And didn't Judge Meyer issue a written opinion decision in which she cited the case law and indicated why your motion to exclude would be denied?
Yes, Your Honor, but again, you're looking at pretrial motions at that time, which with the 12B standard, it has to be renewed at the time of trial. And at this time, there has been no evidence.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong to relitigate this issue now. Your Honor, I'm renewing my objection because the state has not introduced any evidence to support this. That's entirely appropriate for him to do. And for the state to sit there and bitch and moan about it is completely, it's hogwash.
Of domestic abuse other than the charges charged.
Well, there's certainly evidence that a jury could believe. There's photographic evidence of significant bruising. Various witnesses for the state have testified to the, if I remember correctly, upward of 30 locations of trauma injuries on the victim's body, consistent with domestic violence. There's certainly evidence that a jury could believe in domestic violence here. And even along with the bruising, there's text messages in which your client is certainly implicated as the contributor of those injuries. I was going to have a more further discussion with counsel about the admissibility of those statements, but you withdrew any objection because you wanted those statements before the jury. So to say there's no evidence of domestic violence, I certainly don't agree with that. There's certainly been, it's circumstantial, but there is significant evidence of domestic violence by the state. So I don't know that we're now in a different position from Judge Meyer when she ruled that this would be admissible. And so I just want to be clear, because I do recall this being in order on motion to exclude.
Now, if I was the judge, I would have made a bigger argument that the couple nights before this happened, the murder happened, or alleged to have happened, before Kendy died, when the police showed up and she's like, I want to leave, I'm so scared. Yeah, that would probably fit into the whole idea of like a escalating domestic violence spectrum and like matrix. So I'm surprised they don't talk, nobody's talked about that or thrown that in there. Because that'd be the argument I think would drill it home. Like, it escalated. She like got in fear of her life and she went back and she died. Like, the fact nobody's making that argument is really confusing to me. Maybe I'm just that fucking smart. Probably. Let's be real though, that's not the case.
This testimony from trial. And I think I also addressed this as well. And so I won't go into a lengthy explanation because, again, Judge Meyer already provided a written decision on this. And granted, I could disagree with Judge Meyer and decide differently as a trial judge, but I don't see any reason to believe Judge Meyer's ruling. I do agree with it. And as I believe I indicated, well, I'm sorry, I don't have it immediately in front of me, but I believe I also ruled on this and indicated the admissibility order.
I don't know that you directly ruled on this issue. You certainly ruled on the 404B issue to the state's intent to offer the actions of degradation and the verbal abuse that Ms. Howard sustained within her home. I don't specifically recall, Your Honor, directly ruling on Dr. Bostaff. Again, I think because the state believed that was well-settled law.
I'll give this judge credit. He's sitting there going through his stuff. Okay, 404 motion not found. Yeah, no, that's not that 404, KJ. Funny, though. It's like a particularly hard Sudoku today, yeah. He's like, what's 34 across in the New York Times crossword chat? Yeah, he's rereading. I'll give him credit. He's actually trying to like look through this, but there's nothing wrong with the defense saying, hey, I want to reevaluate. Has the field changed at all? Is it reading the latest Stone Toss? Yeah. He's figuring out how to buy one of the plushies.
I wanted to find it because I believe that I briefly touched on this as well, which I did in my February 20th ruling.
Do you have a link to that?
I am going to allow the state to present Dr. Bostaff's testimony I agree with Judge Meyer's analysis, and I'm just going to quote briefly from her decision. Second from the, well, let me just summarize. I'm not going to exactly quote, but the Idaho Supreme Court agreed with the district court that expert testimony general to the characteristics of domestic violence and the reaction of victims to such violence was admissible. Expert testimony which addresses the general progression of a victim or witness, as well as the behavior and characteristics of victim and offender during the progression through those phases, may be admissible. This is especially the case where the expert does not link the general progression of domestic abuse to the particular circumstances of the case. And they're referencing a case called State v. Dutt, 139 Idaho 99. And they note that the expert didn't tie the circumstances and the progression to the case itself, but rather spoke as what they call a blind expert, spoke as an expert generally.
Oh, never mind, Ag, if you're saying that. I'll look for it, don't worry.
Discretion because the generalized testimony gave the juror specialized knowledge that could assist them in evaluating the victim's credibility. The expert did not testify concerning matters outside her demonstrated expertise. In this case, what we'll call a blind expert's testimony is to educate jurors about the dynamics of domestic violence, the effects of domestic violence on victims, the reaction of victims to such violence, as well as to disabuse jurors commonly held misconceptions about domestic violence. This expert, as I understand it, and certainly I would not allow it, will not be speaking to Mr. Howard's behavior, Mr. Howard's propensity, or Mr. Howard at all, or Ms. Kendy Howard either. As courts, Idaho courts across the country have all recognized that cycles of domestic violence, though certainly there's a greater awareness today than in the past, but as a general rule, the dynamics of domestic violence are often outside the general understanding of jurors. Expert testimony to explain behaviors of victims that would otherwise perhaps seem inconsistent with being victims of domestic violence is a subject that expert testimony can help educate a jury on, help them understand and interpret the evidence before them. And so I think, or I know this is admissible testimony in cases where domestic violence is present. Now, were there no evidence in this case of domestic violence, then of course it would be irrelevant. And to the extent the expert may testify to things that aren't present in this case, then those will be irrelevant and easily pointed out by counsel and ignored by the jury. But to the extent I do find that there is certainly, albeit circumstantial, there is significant evidence of domestic violence in this case. And so this testimony is certainly relevant to that, to an understanding, for example, of why a victim might stay, the stages, the progression, what, well, the counsel certainly understands that. And again, this was a subject of pretrial motions, both before Judge Meyer and before me, and I'm going to let those rulings stand. I still believe I can take this one. Okay, thank you for raising that. I appreciate you raising that outside the presence of the jury. We'll bring the jury back in.
Those were fair objections to bring by the defense, chat. Entirely fair and valid. Nothing wrong with it. I think it was a good idea. I would have done it too.
You can be seated. Thank you.
Judge, given our rapid approach towards lunch and that Ms. Myers is now back in the hallway, could I flip-flop on the court again and call Ms. Myers?
Sure.
Thank you. Hannah Myers.
Morning, ma'am. Can you come forward, please? I'll have you face my curtain, raise your right hand and be sworn.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. If you'd have seen your witness stand. As best you can, if you can speak to the microphone.
Hi, Tana Myers,
You may cry.
Could you please spell your last name for the record?
Meyers.
And do you have a maiden name?
Hendren,
Can you spell that as well?
Hendren.
Did you know an individual by the name of Kendy Howard?
Yes.
How did you know her?
We were friends since Elementary school, but better friends in adulthood.
So did you grow up in a particular place?
Yes, we grew up in Kendy, Idaho.
And did you know Kendy throughout your childhood?
Yes.
Back when you were children, did you go to school together throughout your childhood?
Yes, we started about in the 5th grade when she moved to Kendy.
Is Kendy a large place?
No, we had a graduating class of 32 people or 36 people.
Would it be fair to say that you came to know Kendy pretty well throughout that childhood?
Yes, Kendy and I actually became very good friends as adults when I lived in Coeur d'Alene.
Was there a period of time where you lost touch with her and then reconnected, or did you remain friends throughout that period of time?
I would say we reconnected later, like about 7 or 8 years ago.
And was that, as you indicated, when you were living in Coeur d'Alene?
Yes.
When you reconnected with her, how did your friendship develop?
Well, since I moved to Coeur d'Alene, I didn't know anyone, and she reached out to me, and we started having happy hour together and going shopping and having coffee.
Would you communicate with Kendy on a fairly regular basis?
Yes.
And what methods did you use to communicate with her?
We would normally use the Instagram Messenger app.
Would you also communicate on phone, with phone calls?
Yes. Occasionally on the phone, but mostly Messenger.
And would you, again, as you indicated, also get together in person?
Yes, we would have marathon happy hours where we would meet for like 6 hours and have a gab fest or go to shopping and see what sales we could hit at the mall.
During the time that your friendship with Kendy developed, would you have characterized that friendship as close?
Yes.
What was Kendy's demeanor during this period of time?
Well, when we got together, it was just always happy because we were having a good time as women, you know, chatting and getting to do whatever we wanted and having our coffee or maybe a cocktail.
In the period of time closer to her death, so 2020, 2021, did you remain in close communication with Kendy?
Yes.
Had you continued to reside in Coeur d'Alene at that point in time?
No, I had moved to Scottsdale, Arizona.
And despite that move, did you continue to communicate with her?
Oh, yes.
During that period of time, did Kendy share with you any plans for her future?
Yes, she did.
Did she indicate to you whether or not that future included her husband, Dan Howard?
For a couple of years, she had talked to me about her plans to get a divorce.
Did those plans solidify closer to her death?
Yes, they did.
Permission to retrieve Exhibit 40 from Madam Clerk.
You bet.
Guys, I'll be right back.
May I approach the witness?
You bet.
Myers, I'm going to hand you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 40. Do you recognize generally what this is? And feel free to flip through.
Yes, this is our text messages on Facebook Messenger.
Do those appear to be an accurate portion of conversations that you had with Kendy Howard?
Yes.
And to admit State's 40?
No objection. No objection to the 40s again.
Ms. Myers, were you in communication with Ms. Howard in the days before her death?
Yes.
And was that in that Facebook Messenger communication that you just looked at?
Yes.
Permission to publish to the jury?
You bet. Are you wanting the jury's opportunity to read it now?
I think so.
Okay. So does the jury just take a minute to read it? Maybe look up when we're done.
sorry guys, I'm back.
Meyer, what do you do for work?
I'm a housewife now.
Is there a point in time that you ever worked in real estate?
Yeah, I worked in real estate for about 20-something years. I was a broker.
Was Kendy Howard aware of your profession?
Yes.
And were you working as a real estate broker during the period of time that the two of you were friends?
Yes.
Did you ever discuss with her buying a house?
Yes.
Did you talk with her about that process?
Yes.
Did you talk with her about some of the paperwork and other aspects of buying a house?
Yes.
Did you answer any questions that she had about that process?
Yes.
In your conversation with her about buying a house, what was her demeanor?
She was extremely excited.
In your many years of friendship with Ms. Howard, did you come to know her opinion of guns?
Yes.
What was that?
Kendy didn't want to handle guns. Her and I had a very long conversation about it just prior to her death, because I previously had dated a state cop for 7 years, and her husband was a state cop. And we...
And I'm gonna stop you there because I don't want to get into anything that might be inadmissible for the rules of the court. But generally, did she like or dislike guns?
She didn't know how to use a gun, and she didn't like them.
In your years of friendship with Ms. Howard, did you come to know her opinion of her body?
Yes.
Did Kendy ever express to you dissatisfaction with the way her body looked?
Yes, because she was constantly on a diet, and she also talked about how her husband talked derogatory about her.
Objection, hearsay. Your response?
Judge, I can rephrase the question. Without telling exactly what Kendy said to you, did Kendy have some self-worth issues when it came to how her body looked?
Yes.
Do you know how Kendy felt about being naked?
Objection, foundation. You can play foundation.
In your did you have many conversations over the course of your years of friendship with Kendy Howard about self-image?
Yes.
And in the course of those conversations, did you ever discuss certain aspects of her body?
Yes.
Did you ever discuss with Kendy aspects of her body and how it looked when she wasn't clothed?
Yes.
During those course of those conversations, did you come to understand how Kendy felt about being naked?
Yes.
What opinion did Kendy hold about being naked?
She didn't want to be naked in front of anyone.
I don't have any other questions, but Mr. Johnson will.
Did she get naked in front of you a lot? Ooh.
Permission to approach her.
Yeah.
Ms. Myers, good afternoon, or good morning. I handed you what's been marked as Defense Exhibit D. Do you recognize those messages?
Can I look at it?
Yes.
Hello, everybody coming over from Rob Gavea.
Yes.
Those are,
Catherine, they were still living together, but she was in the process of getting a new house. The thing is, he worked in Alaska, so he's gone for weeks at a time.
it's a copy of other portions of conversations you had with Kendy.
Yes.
Your Honor, move to admit Defense D.
Any objection?
Yes, Judge, I am going to object. Certain portions of that messages are inadmissible hearsay. I object also on the grounds of foundation.
Can I have counsel first, please?
interesting on what this is going to be about, but we won't get to know. We will not get to know, Chiat. Okay, there we go.
I'm not sure.
Are you aware whether her son and Dan have fired that gun?
I have no idea.
She described having a midlife crisis to you, correct?
I don't know if those are the exact words.
Do you still have Exhibit 46 in front of you? From the state?
Is this the one you gave me, 46?
The one I gave you is D, Defense D. May I approach the John?
You may.
Council's going to do.
Okay. So this is not the same. Okay.
The yellow is state and blue is city.
Okay.
So on that first page of,
Judge, I would ask that counsel accurately identify the exhibit he's asking the witness to testify on.
Sure.
so looking at plaintiff's Exhibit 40, with the yellow sticker there.
Yes.
Third line up, Ms. Howard describes, think midlife crisis, correct?
Yes, I do see that now.
Okay, and that's after she mentioned buying a house and getting a tongue tuck.
Yes, I do see that.
And later on the next page, about 4 lines up, is your understanding that she did not have a plan for a job at that time?
Am I allowed to talk about the phone conversation?
Counsel will ask you about that. But on Exhibit 40,
Yes.
you asked her, what about a job, right?
Yes, I did.
And her response was, I don't know.
Yes.
You also asked her about whether she was dating Mr. Prado, is that right?
Yes, I did.
And she denied dating him?
Yes, she did.
Now, going to the defense exhibit 40, this is on, again, a couple days before her passing. She describes waking up scared about the changes in her life, correct?
Yes.
The last message on the last page, do you see how it says author, sent, and then the body of the text?
Yes.
Now comparing, just looking at the differences between defense exhibit and the state's exhibit, if you look at the state's exhibit, do you see blue numbers or timestamps on the right side?
Yes.
So going straight across, do you know what UTC is?
On theirs?
Yes.
No.
So there's been testimony that the state, Ms. Marhofer,
Object to counsel informing the witness as to what other people have testified.
it's not offered for the truth, Your Honor, context. There's been testimony that Ms. Marhofer has traded those blue date stamps to recreate the actual time in our time zone. Do you see how they're about 8 hours difference?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So turning back to the defense exhibit, the last page, she sent you a message at 4:50 UTC on the 3rd, correct?
Yes, but that's not the time.
It would be 8 hours earlier. That would be about 8:50 our time zone.
Yes, that's the correct time. Because I have it on my phone and I checked as well.
Permission to retrieve exhibits, Ron? Thank you, Michael.
Redirect, or do you want to do that?
It'll be pretty quick, I think, Judge.
Redirect, go ahead.
You indicated to counsel that you had a phone call as well. Do you recall that?
Yes.
What did you talk about in that phone call?
It was a very long hour-and-a-half phone call.
During that phone call, did Kendy discuss with you her plans for the future?
Yes.
Did she talk to you about moving to Kenny?
Yes.
Did she talk to you about plans for possible job options?
Yes.
During that phone call, did Kendy indicate to you why she might be, quote, scared as FK?
It was a life change, and she'd been married a long time. But she was excited. She had multiple ideas on what she wanted to do with the rest of her life.
In your conversation with Kendy that counsel showed you, at any point in that conversation, did she indicate that she was turning back?
No,
In your conversation with her on the phone, did she ever indicate to you that she was turning back?
no.
No other questions.
Thank you. Can you sit down? All right, we're at our new break, so we'll be in recess. We'll see you back at 1:30. Reminder not to discuss the case. We'll be in recess at this time. Please rise for the jury.
Okay, wow, Chet, that's really interesting. At the end, you know what she's like, why do you think she was scared as hell? Oh, because she was starting a new life. I was waiting for her to say, because she thought Dan was going to kill her. I noticed she didn't bring that up. That's a very weird statement. Huh. Makes you think a little bit, huh? So. Do people not know how to pronounce Greenwich Mean Time or something? Well, no, it's called UTC on the thing. So, that's what they use. They use the things right there. Because if you say Greenwich Mean Time, people might be like, what? So, but it's weird that she didn't say, oh my God, Kendy was scared of Dan. That's very helpful for the defense. Notice the prosecutor is trying to get that out of her. And she's like, no, she's going to be starting a new life. It's scary. You know, she's in Moana mode. Just like it's, you know, riding out on the raft. It's not like she's worried about somebody killing her. Harbour War because she was trying to divorce the rape dude and he was excited for the money but scared of the consequences. Yeah. I'm just saying it's interesting she didn't include it that way. She said, oh no, because she's starting a new life, not, oh my God, her husband's going to kill her. So, guys, we'll go for another 20 minutes here, but I'm going to wrap this up at 8:30. So let's just get through lunch here and see what happens. No lunch breaks for chat, though. So. Let's go. Let's go, chattel.
All right, we'll be in recess.
Here we go. Whoop, 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 whoop. Whoop. Empty chair stream.
Deputy Ben.
Do you promise that testimony about to give in this case will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. If you have a seat here and stand. And then I'll ask as best you can if you'll speak in time. You're welcome to adjust the full close speakers.
Okay, thank you.
You may inquire.
Would you please state your full name and spell your last name for the record?
Lisa Marie Growett Bostaff, GROWETTEBOSTAPH.
How are you employed?
I'm a professor of criminal justice at Boise State University.
In your current duties, do you teach?
I do.
Is that your primary duty?
It's one of my primary duties.
How long have you worked in your current position?
This is my 21st year at the university.
In your 21 years at the university, have you primarily focused on a particular area of criminal justice?
Domestic and sexual violence.
Do you hold any education that allows you to work in this field?
I hold a PhD in criminal justice.
Did you go through some education before you got to that point?
Yes.
Can you describe that education for us?
The PhD program at the University of Cincinnati, where I got my degree, requires 2 years of coursework on the criminal justice system, on theories of criminal offending, on investigations, depending on your specialty, some electives if you get to choose, and then you spend a year taking comprehensive evaluations to test your knowledge in the areas, and then you spend probably another 2 years conducting a research study and writing a dissertation.
Have you also worked at other places in the area of criminal justice?
I have.
Can you give us a brief rundown on that?
I started my career in criminal justice at the Northeast or Airhead Regional Corrections Agency, ARC, in Duluth, Minnesota, working in the Department of Probation, where I worked on a special project. And I went from there to the Duluth Domestic Abuse Intervention Program, where I worked as a liaison between batterer treatment for domestic violence offenders and the court system. From there, I was hired by 4 policing agencies in suburbs around Minneapolis, Minnesota, to build a crime scene crisis intervention program for domestic violence, sexual assault, and child abuse cases. After that, I went to the Chisago County Attorney's Office, where I worked as a victim witness coordinator focused on violent crime.
In your either educational roles or employment roles, have you engaged in any writing or publications?
I have.
Can you briefly walk us through some of that?
There are multiple ways that professors can publish. We publish in scientific journals. I have roughly 20-some publications in scientific journals, with another 4 to 5 currently either being revised or under review by scientific journals. We can also write research reports based on the studies that we conduct. I have 20, probably 20 plus of those research reports, 5 in the last year.
Do you also review the work of others?
I do. I review for several scientific journals.
And as part of your ongoing work, do you take efforts to maintain being informed on the research that's being done in your particular specialty?
Yes, it's required for both. If you're going to teach relevant topics to your students, you have to be current on research. Also, if you're conducting research studies, in order to ask questions that need to be asked, you have to understand what has been asked already and what has already been studied.
Have you ever served on any advisory committees, particularly for either governments or court systems?
I served on the Idaho Coordinated Response to Domestic and Sexual Violence, which was a statewide coordinated team here in Idaho. I served on as a parole commissioner for the Idaho Commission on Pardons and Parole for 7 years. I have served on the Behavioral Health Task Force that the governor and the legislature put together, and I served on the Criminal Justice Work Group for that.
You testified as an expert before?
I have.
Permission to approach the witness?
Yes.
Dr. Bostock, I'm going to show you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit 82. Do you recognize this? And feel free to flip through if you need to.
I do. That's my curriculum vitae or resume.
Does that appear to be an accurate copy of your CV?
It's not the most recent copy.
Have you actually done more work than what's just included on this?
Yes.
Does this appear to be accurate within, let's say, the last year?
Yes, with the additions of the last year, yes.
Move to admit states 82.
No objection.
82 is a good.
Like, ma'am, if you committed domestic violence, how do you really understand domestic violence if you haven't done it yourself?
Dr. Bostock, are you familiar with an individual by the name of Kendy Howard?
No.
Are you familiar with an individual by the name of Daniel Howard?
No.
Have you reviewed any police reports or photographs associated with either Kendy Howard or Daniel Howard?
No.
Are you here today to testify as what's known as a blind expert?
Yes.
Through your training and experience, fair to say you're familiar generally with the concept of domestic violence?
Yes.
Can you kind of give us a broad definition of what domestic violence encompasses?
Domestic violence generally encompasses the use of coercion, threats, intimidation, isolation, economic control, emotional abuse, in order to maintain power and control in a relationship of one person over another, usually with the threat of sexual or domestic violence, sexual or physical violence, I should say.
Now, does that mean that domestic violence can encompass more than just physical violence?
Yes.
How so?
Well, if I can have you think about a wheel, like
and why don't I show you a wheel? Would
Okay,
that be helpful
yeah.
in explaining your testimony to the jury?
Sure.
A wheel? But women
And is
don't have
this
wheels
a,
in the kitchen.
Is this something that you frequently utilize in either your teaching or your research? And I'll show it to you here in just a second. So this would be States 25A.
Yes, that's the power and control wheel developed by the Duluth Domestic Abuse Intervention Program in Duluth, Minnesota in the middle 1990s.
Is this widely accepted by other experts in your field?
Yes.
And is it utilized by you both in your training and in your research?
Yes.
Move to admit States 25A.
Any objection?
I believe that's the for demonstrative purposes.
Okay. I think that's fair. It sounds like that's how you're using it. So there'll be a demonstrative exhibit. So again, it's nice it'll be a demonstrative because if that means it won't go back and be considered as part of the evidence, it'll be used in court for this witness to help explain it.
Dr. Bostock, Is this the wheel that you were just referring to?
Yes.
Okay. And you stated that this is something that's widely utilized by individuals in your field?
Yes.
So, what are we looking at here?
What we're looking at is using the concept of a wheel, if you think about a bicycle wheel, to represent domestic violence relationships. So at the axis of the wheel, the center part, is the idea that power and control is the center of domestic violence. Thank you.
If you need to step out to see better, you're welcome to, or if you're able
So
to
when,
stand there, that's
like,
fine.
Okay, I think I'm fine.
so when Captain Kirk told Scotty he needed more power, was Captain Kirk abusing Scotty? Because there was that power dynamic, and they had a superior and subservient relationship there. Something to think about. Something to think about.
Here. Otherwise, I'll pace. The center of the wheel here, the axis of it, represents power and control, which is, as I said, considered to be the basis, the primary reason for domestic violence in the situation, in the relationship, that one person aims to have power and control over another person. Just wanting power and control, of course, isn't enough. You have to actually do something to gain that power and control. And so these spokes of the wheel that you see here represent various tactics or ways that people who are engaging in domestic violence will try to achieve and maintain power and control in the relationship. So you have things like using intimidation, being intimidating, whether that's using a physical presence, whether that's using a threat. You can also see coercion and threats over here. Using economic abuse means restricting access to funds. If someone wants to leave a relationship, generally you need to have some access to money to put a down payment on an apartment to rent or to put gas in your vehicle or buy a vehicle.
And Dr. Brosap, just let me, so we don't get in trouble with Mr. Johnson, let me ask you a couple of follow-up questions.
Sure.
So in this power and control wheel, does this help to explain the different non-violent ways that a domestic abuser might exert power and control over their victim?
Yes, that's exactly what these various spokes in the wheel are doing. Those are the various things they do in order to maintain power and control.
And does every domestic abuser utilize all of these, or some, or do they bounce around? How does that typically play out?
No, it's not every domestic violence relationship looks the same. In fact, every domestic violence relationship likely looks slightly different because some people will find that some of these tactics work fine in order to maintain power and control, while others will use some of the other tactics because either they prefer them or they've been found to be more successful in maintaining power and control in the relationship. That's what makes each individual domestic violence relationship somewhat unique.
Now, I see that you have physical and sexual violence on the outside of the wheel. What does that symbolize?
So if you think about, once again, a bicycle wheel, you have the axis of it, and you have all the spokes, but the wheel won't stay together unless you have something outside of it holding it together. And in this diagram here, the idea is that the use of physical or sexual violence, or the threat of using physical or sexual violence, is what holds all of this together. That these tactics work because of a presence that if I don't abide by what's happening with these tactics, then physical or sexual violence will be used against me.
So does that mean that physical violence, actually acting on that physical violence needs to occur frequently in the relationship?
No.
How so?
Well, if the tactics are working in maintaining power and control, then there really wouldn't be a need to use domestic or physical or sexual violence because the tactics are successful. If the tactics aren't successful, then an abuser resorts to physical or sexual violence to essentially hold up the threats that they've made.
So within the wheel, these other spokes, such as emotional abuse or financial control, would these in and of themselves be considered abuse?
Yes.
And would these in and of themselves be designed to have an effect on the victim regardless of the physical abuse?
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, for example, using emotional abuse, one of the points of emotional abuse, if you think about this, is if someone is continually running you down, tearing you down emotionally and psychologically, you begin to not believe in yourself. You begin to think of yourself as something less than. People who don't believe that they are capable of things are less likely to have the ability to get up and leave a relationship. It makes it harder for them to do that. The same thing with economic abuse. Restricting access to money further isolates a victim because it doesn't allow them to go or leave in many ways that they want to. In some extreme forms of domestic violence, victims have to request money to go to the grocery store. They have to produce a receipt to demonstrate how much money they spent on it, and they have to produce the exact change. Otherwise, the abuser believes that they are hiding money. So the purpose of economic abuse is to keep victims from being able to squirrel away money that they could then later use to leave the relationship.
Now, Dr. Bostaff, do all of these forms of abuse within a domestic violence relationship result in victim behavior that can be counterintuitive?
Can you say that again, please?
Sure. So the things that we were talking about, these are actions of a domestic abuser, correct?
Correct.
And you started to talk in your answer there about how that creates a feeling or an effect in the victim, correct?
Correct.
In your research and studies, have you found that there are behaviors that are exhibited by victims in domestic violence relationships that might seem strange or counterintuitive?
Yes.
What kinds of behaviors are commonly seen in victims of domestic abuse?
Well, one of the primary things is that the latest numbers out of the National Crime Victimization Survey demonstrate that only 49.5% of victims of domestic violence ever report to the police. So if you're being abused, most people would think, well, it's reasonable that you would report to the police, but almost half of victims do not report to the police for a variety of reasons that may be due to religious beliefs about the sanctity of their relationship, may be due to fear that if they report, that the abuser will become even more abusive towards them, fear that the abuser could, if the abuser's made threats towards them, that the abuser would actually act on those threats against them.
Are you aware of any research about that other 50%, whether or not they do report the first time they experience domestic violence?
That's really difficult to say. It varies by studies and whether studies are actually looking at that. We conducted a study in Idaho looking at about 200 cases in one locality, one city in Idaho, and about 49% of the people who reported to the police indicate that there had been no prior unwanted contact from that person, from their partner before.
And so the inverse of that would be that half of those people did not report the first time it happened.
Yes, correct.
What is victim minimizing?
Victim minimizing is when generally when an outside person, whether that's a family member, a friend, or if they're reporting, or if a neighbor reported, a police officer, for example, essentially confronts a victim and suggests that they are being abused. And in many instances, victims will minimize the behavior, meaning they'll say, it's not as bad as what you think it is, it's not as bad as you sound, he's not always like that, he's a good father, trying to minimize the perception of that individual of how bad the abuse is at home.
Is that something that is commonly seen in domestic violence relationships?
Yes.
Is it common within domestic violence relationships for victims to return to the relationship even after physical violence has occurred?
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, the majority of, and I'll just use the term women here because in reported cases, even in unreported cases, roughly 78 to 80% of people reporting that they have been a victim of domestic violence are women. So, and for that purpose, I'll use the term women here. But the majority of women who experience domestic violence one time don't leave the first time. They may not leave after the second time. In fact, a majority of women will likely attempt to leave multiple times before they're actually successful at leaving the domestic violence relationship.
What do you mean by attempt to leave?
They may go and stay at a family member's house for the night. They may go stay with a girlfriend. They may actually get an order for protection, which is a civil court order that tells another person that they have to stay away from them. They may actually go as far as to do a formal separation from that person if they're legally married. They may even say they're ending the relationship. There are multiple ways that that separation can occur.
So then why do they go back?
For a number of reasons. A number of reasons that are very similar as to why they minimize. If they've experienced emotional abuse, their self-esteem has likely been really shattered. And so their ability to believe that they can live outside of that relationship by themselves takes a toll, and they begin to doubt themselves. Also, there are, as I said before, sometimes religious considerations. If they belong to a faith that doesn't support or accept divorce or separation, then they may feel as though their religious ties are really telling them to go back to the relationship. Other times, the threats and violence don't end. In fact, when a victim separates or attempts to separate from a relationship, the likelihood of further and significantly more dangerous levels of violence increase significantly after leaving a relationship, which is really counterintuitive to what most people would think, that once you get yourself out of that relationship, you're much safer, and that's actually really not the case for a period of time.
So before we get a little bit farther into that topic, I wanted to ask you though a little bit more about that dynamic of leaving the relationship. Is it ever common that that the domestic abuser will return to some of these tactics or even positive tactics to try and get the victim to return to the relationship?
Sure. When a victim separates, generally what's happened, right, is this victim is leaving this relationship where someone has really wanted to maintain power and control over that person, so that person's leaving. And the abuser says, okay, well, that's really not acceptable, so I need to get you to come back. And that can take various forms. It can take forms of using coercion and threats. All of those threats that I said to you before, I said I would, you'd really get it if you left me, that I would hunt you down. I'm going to do that unless you come back. Now, for a victim of domestic violence, they've lived with these if-then statements for a very long time. If you do this, then this will happen. Or more likely, if you don't do this, then this will happen. So, and most of the time, the abuser has lived up to those things. So they believe them. When an abuser makes a threat, the victim believes it. So they can use coercion and threats to get the victim to come back, with the victim perceiving that if I'm in the relationship, at least I can see the land in front of me. I can see what every day is like. Maybe I can predict what he's going to be like. Maybe I can see if he's getting more angry, but I'm there. If I'm outside of the relationship, I don't know where he is. He could be anywhere. And so in that frame of mind, staying in the relationship actually makes sense for my safety. Now, the other side is there can be what's called a honeymoon period after a victim leaves, where an abuser will return to actions that he took when they were courting to get the victim to come back. Generally, these include promises of going to treatment, if alcohol or drugs are involved, promises of sobriety, promises that things will be better. This could entail sending gifts, sending flowers, having intermediaries go and plead his case on his behalf, friends or family who are in common. There are a number of ways that can.
All right, chat. That is it for tonight. We're at 8. It's 8:30. We gotta stop here. I need to get ready for tonight, so we're gonna call it a night. We got, oh gosh, how much time do we got left here? We got about 2. We got a little under 3 hours left. And hold on one second. Hey, Nico, did you see 2.0's message? She was trying to get, because I also sent you an email if you're in here. So anyway, that is it for right now, guys. I will see you at 9:30. If you guys are new, we do the live show at 9:30 every Thursday. And until then, I will see you guys there. So good night for right now, and I'll see you guys in about an hour. Take care, everybody. Bye.